Chapter 1: The Fatal Date Stone. In a time long ago, when the world moved at the pace of camel caravans and the stars were the only map across endless deserts, there lived a merchant named Salim ibn Yusuf. His life unfolded in one of the great cities of the East, where minarets reached toward heaven and the air was always thick with the scent of cardamom and cinnamon. Salim was a wealthy man, though wealth came to him not through cunning or cruelty, but through honesty. His word was his bond. When Salim promised silk, it arrived softer than clouds. When he spoke of spices, they were fragrant beyond imagination. Merchants across distant lands knew his name, and they trusted it as they trusted the sunrise. His home was beautiful, filled with carpets from Persia, lamps from Damascus, and the laughter of his wife and 3 children. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, he would sit in his garden beneath a pomegranate tree, listening to the fountain's gentle whisper, watching his children play in the fading golden light. But a merchant's life is also a life of journeys, and so it was that in the hottest month of summer, when the sun turned the world into molten copper, Salim prepared for a long expedition across the desert. 20 camels were loaded with good sabolts of Chinese silk, Indian spices sealed in clay jars, Yemeni frankincense wrapped in oiled cloth. 10 trusted servants would accompany him, men who had traveled with him before and knew the desert's moods. The morning of departure arrived soft and early. His wife held him close, her eyes searching his face. His children clung to his robes. "I will return before the autumn rains," he promised them, kissing each small forehead. "And I will bring you gifts from the edges of the world." And so the caravan departed, moving slowly out through the city gates as the sun rose, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The desert, when you are inside it, becomes everything. It is not merely a place you pass through, it becomes the walls of your world. Sand stretches in every direction, rolling like frozen waves. The sky is impossibly vast, impossibly blue. During the day, heat rises from the ground in shimmering curtains, making distant dunes dance and waver like mirages. At night, the temperature drops so suddenly it feels like falling through ice, and the stars emerge in such stunning numbers that the darkness itself seems to glow. Day followed day in gentle, monotonous rhythm. The camels swayed, the bells on their necks chimed softly. The servants sang old songs to pass the time, songs about lovers and lost cities and the gardens of paradise. Salim rode at the front, his eyes always scanning the horizon, watching for the next landmark, the next well, the next blessed patch of green. On the 7th day, as the sun began its slow descent toward the western edge of the world, painting the sky in colors of fire and honey, the caravan came upon an oasis. It was small, but beautiful. 6 or 7 date palms stood in a loose circle around a clear spring. The water bubbled up from deep in the earth, cold and pure. Around the spring, grass grew in a ring of impossible green, and small white flowers dotted the ground like scattered stars. "We camp here tonight," Salim announced, and his men cheered softly, grateful for the gift of water and shade. The camels were unloaded and allowed to drink. Tents were raised, their canvas snapping gently in the evening breeze. A fire was built. Soon the smell of bread baking on hot stones and lamb roasting on skewers filled the air, mixing with the sweet perfume of the date palms. Salim walked away from the camp, seeking a moment of solitude. He found a smooth stone beneath one of the palms and sat down, leaning his back against the rough trunk. Above him, the fronds whispered secrets to each other in a language older than words. Before him, the spring reflected the deepening colors of sunset, orange, purple, deep blue slowly bleeding into black. He reached into his travel bag and pulled out a small cloth sack. Inside were fresh dates, plump and sticky sweet, purchased in the last village they had passed. He took one and bit into it slowly, savoring the honey-like taste. The fruit was perfect soft, rich, melting on his tongue. When he had eaten the flesh, he held the hard pit in his palm for a moment, feeling its smooth surface still warm from his hand. Then, without thinking, he tossed it aside into the grass. The pit landed with the smallest of sounds, a nothing sound, the kind of sound the world makes 1,000 times each second and no one notices. But this time the world noticed. For a moment, everything was still. The palm fronds stopped whispering, the spring stopped murmuring. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And then the air before Salim began to shimmer and twist. It thickened, darkened, took on weight and form. Smoke that was not smoke rose from the ground, spiraling upward, coalescing, becoming solid. A figure stood before him. It was enormous, atwise the height of a man, perhaps 3 times. Its body was like polished bronze, its eyes like pools of liquid fire. It wore robes that seemed woven from shadow and starlight, and in its massive hand it gripped a curved sword longer than Salim was tall. The blade gleamed with a cold, hungry light. Salim's heart stopped, then began again, hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The creature's voice, when it spoke, was like thunder rolling across distant mountains, deep, ancient, filled with grief and rage. "You have killed my son." Salim could not speak. His mouth opened, but no sound came. His mind spun, trying to understand, trying to find solid ground in a world that had suddenly become unreal. I have done no such thing," he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "I am a merchant. I harm no one. You threw a stone," the djinn said, his voice cracking like breaking stone. "My son was here, invisible to your eyes, resting in the cool of this oasis. Your stone struck him in the temple. He died instantly." The djinn's hand trembled on the sword hilt. A single tear, bright as molten gold, rolled down his bronze cheek. "For a year I searched for the one who killed him, and now I have found you. The scent of your soul matches the scent that lingered on the stone. You cannot deny it. You cannot escape it." Salim felt the world tilting. He pressed his hand against the palm trunk to steady himself. "It was an accident," he whispered. "I did not see him. I did not know. Accident or intention, what does it matter?" The djinn raised his sword. "My son is dead. His laughter is gone from the world. His mother weeps every night. The law is clear, a life for a life, blood for blood." The sword caught the last rays of sunlight, blazing like a falling star. Salim closed his eyes. In his mind he saw his wife's face, his children's smiles, the garden with its pomegranate tree and singing fountain, all of it about to become memory, about to slip into the past like water through fingers. But then he opened his eyes again, and he spoke, his voice growing steadier. "You are right. A life for a life. The law is just. But grant me one mercy." The djinn paused, the sword still raised. "Speak. Give me 1 year," Salim said. 1 year to return to my city, to settle my affairs, to provide for my wife and children, to say goodbye. I give you my word, a sacred oath before Allah and all that is holy. I will return to this place in exactly 1 year. You may take my life then. I will not resist. I will not hide. But let me die with my honor intact. Let me die having fulfilled my obligations." The djinn stared at him for a long moment. The fire in his eyes flickered, dimmed slightly. "Your word?" he asked. "My word," Salim replied, "and I have never broken my word." Another long silence. The wind returned, soft and cool, carrying the scent of water and dates and distant rain. Finally, the Jinn lowered his sword. "1 year," he said. "Return here when the next summer sun reaches this same angle in the sky. I will be waiting. If you do not come, I will find you wherever you hide, and your death will be far worse than it would have been today." "I will come," Salim said quietly. The Jinn began to dissolve, his form becoming smoke again, becoming shadow, becoming nothing. His voice lingered a moment longer, hanging in the air like an echo in an empty hall. "1 year, merchant. Do not make me hunt you." And then he was gone. Salim sat beneath the palm tree as darkness fell completely, as the stars emerged one by one, as the night deepened around him. His servants called for him from the camp, but he did not answer, not yet. He sat and breathed and felt the weight of the promise he had made. 1 year, 1 year to live. Chapter 2, The Bargain of Time. The caravan continued its journey the next morning, but everything had changed. The sun still rose in gold and crimson. The camels still swayed with their gentle rhythm. The desert still stretched endlessly in all directions. But for Salim, the world had become a different place, smaller, more precious, and achingly temporary. He did not tell his servants what had happened. How could he? They would think him mad, struck by sun sickness or desert visions. Or worse, they would believe him and grieve, and he could not bear to carry their sorrow along with his own. So he rode in silence, watching the days pass like water slipping through an hourglass. The journey took 3 more weeks. They crossed salt flats where the ground crunched beneath the camels' feet, and the white expanse hurt the eyes. They passed through narrow canyons where ancient rocks rose like the ruins of giant temples. They stopped at villages where children ran out to greet them, and old men sat in the shade, telling stories that had been old when their grandfathers were young. Finally, the walls of his city appeared on the horizon. Familiar, beloved, terrible to see. Home, the place where his heart lived, the place he would have to leave forever. The gates opened to receive him. The streets were filled with the usual chaos. Merchants shouting, donkeys braying, women bargaining over fish and fabric, children playing games in the dust. Everything exactly as he had left it. Everything completely different now. He went first to his warehouse to settle accounts with his partners, then to the homes of those who owed him money, forgiving every debt with a wave of his hand. "Consider it a gift," he told each astonished debtor. "Life is short. Let there be no bitterness between us." Then, finally, he went home. His children saw him first and came running, shrieking with joy. He caught them up in his arms, buried his face in their hair, breathed in their smell of honey and sunshine and innocence. His wife appeared in the doorway, smiling, her eyes bright with relief and happiness. That night they had a feast. His wife had prepared all his favorite dishes alam with apricots and almonds, rice scented with saffron, flatbread still warm from the oven, honey cakes that melted on the tongue. They ate by lamplight in the garden, and his children told him everything that had happened while he was gone. The cat had kittens. The neighbor's son got married. A traveling magician had performed in the square. He listened to every word as if it were sacred scripture. He memorized their faces in the flickering light. He held his wife's hand and felt the warmth of her skin and tried to press this moment so deeply into his memory that not even death could erase it. Later, when the children were asleep, he told his wife everything. She listened without interrupting, her face growing pale, her hand tightening around his. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Don't go back," she finally whispered. "Run, hide, take us far away, change your name. The jinn will never find us." Salim shook his head slowly. "I gave my word. Your word will make your children fatherless, and breaking my word would make them the children of a coward and a liar." He touched her face gently. "What am I if not my word? What is a man if his promise means nothing? I would rather die with honor than live in shame." She wept then, pressing her face against his chest, her tears soaking into his robe. He held her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Some griefs are too large for words. The months that followed were strange. Salim knew he should be miserable, counting down the days to his death, but instead, he found himself happier than he had been in years. Every morning was a gift, every meal was a feast, every sunset was a masterpiece painted just for him. He played with his children more than he ever had before. He helped his wife in the garden, getting his hands dirty in the soil, planting seeds he would never see grow. He walked through the city slowly, noticing things he had always rushed past. The way light fell through a latticed window, the sound of a flute from a distant rooftop, the smile of an old woman selling oranges. He gave away most of his wealth, to his servants, to the poor, to the mosque, to anyone who needed it. He kept only enough to provide for his family after he was gone. His friends noticed the change in him. "You seem different," they said, "lighter somehow." "I am learning to appreciate what I have," he told them, instead of worrying about what I might lose. The autumn rains came and went. Winter arrived with cool winds and rare frost. Spring brought wildflowers to the hills outside the city. And then summer returned, hot and relentless, and Salim knew his time was almost gone. On the last evening, he gathered his family in the garden one final time. He had written letters for each of his children to be given to them when they were older. He had arranged for his brother to manage his remaining business affairs. He had prepared everything he could prepare. "I don't want you to go," his youngest daughter said, clinging to his leg. She was only 5 years old and didn't fully understand what was happening, only that something was wrong, something was ending. "I know, little one," he said, picking her up, "but sometimes we must do hard things because they are right. Remember that. Remember that your father kept his word, even when it cost him everything." His wife did not weep this time. She had wept all her tears in the months before. Now she simply held him, her body pressed against his, as if she could keep him there through the sheer force of her love. "I will wait for you," she whispered, "in this life or the next." At dawn, Salim kissed each of them one last time. Then he walked alone through the city gates, carrying nothing but a water skin and a small bag of bread. He did not look back. If he looked back, he would not be able to leave. The journey to the oasis took 7 days, just as before, but this time Salim traveled alone. No camels, no servants, no goods to trade, just a man walking toward his fate with steady steps and a quiet heart. He thought about many things as he walked, about the strange nature of time, how the last year had felt both impossibly short and infinitely long, about the jinn, and whether a father's grief was really so different from his own grief at leaving his children, about the invisible threads that connect all living things, and how a thrown stone could set in motion events that rippled across years. On the 7th day, as the sun reached its highest point, he saw the palms of the oasis rising from the desert like an island in an ocean of sand. He had kept his word. He had come back to die. Chapter 3. The 3 Old Men. Salim approached the oasis slowly, his feet heavy despite his resolve. The date palms stood exactly as he remembered them, casting pools of precious shade on the sand. The spring still bubbled clear and cold from the earth. White flowers still dotted the grass, and the air still smelled of water and green growing things. But something was different. 3 old men sat near the spring. The first old man had a gazelle with him, a beautiful creature with liquid brown eyes and delicate legs. It lay beside him with its head in his lap, and he stroked its neck gently, rhythmically, as if comforting a child. The second old man was accompanied by 2 black dogs. They sat on either side of him, perfectly still, their eyes alert and strangely intelligent. Something about those dogs made Salim uncomfortable, though he could not say why. The third old man had a mule. It stood behind him, occasionally stamping a hoof or swishing its tail at flies. But it, too, seemed oddly attentive, as if listening to every sound, watching every movement. The 3 old men looked up as Salim approached. Their faces were weathered, creased with the lines of long lives, but their eyes were sharp and knowing. "Peace be upon you, traveler," the first old man said. "And upon you peace," Salim replied automatically, though his mind was elsewhere, scanning the oasis for any sign of the jinn. "You seem troubled," the second old man observed. "Sit, rest, share our fire." He gestured to a small campfire that crackled cheerfully between them, a pot of tea steaming above the flames. "I cannot," Salim said. I am waiting for someone." "Then wait with us," the third old man suggested. "Waiting is easier with company." There was something in their voices, a gentleness, a understanding, that made Salim hesitate. He looked around the oasis again. The sun was beginning its descent, but it had not yet reached the angle it had been at exactly 1 year ago. He had perhaps an hour, maybe 2. "Very well," he said finally, and sat down on the grass near the fire. The first old man poured him a cup of tea. It was mint tea, sweet and hot, and it tasted like mercy. "Why do you wait here?" the second old man asked. "This is a lonely place to keep a vigil." And so, because there was nothing left to lose, and because secrets seem less heavy when shared, Salim told them his story. He told them about the date pit, about the jinn, about the year he had been given, and the promise he had made. The 3 old men listened in silence. When he finished, they looked at each other, and something passed between them, some wordless communication, some shared understanding. "You are a rare man," the first old man said softly. "Most would have run, most would have hidden, most would have broken their word the moment the jinn disappeared." "What is a man without his word?" Salim replied, echoing what he had told his wife. "Indeed," the third old man murmured. "What is a man without his word?" They sat in silence for a time, watching the sun slip lower. The gazelle shifted in the first old man's lap, making a small sound like a sigh. The dogs remained perfectly still, like statues carved from shadow. The mule flicked its ears forward as if listening to something far away. "He comes," the gazelle said. Salim's head snapped toward the creature. Had it spoken? But no, that was impossible. Animals did not speak. He must have imagined it. But the 3 old men did not seem surprised. They simply nodded and stood up, brushing dust from their robes. The air began to shimmer. The temperature dropped suddenly, dramatically, as if a door had opened onto winter. And the jinn appeared. He looked exactly as he had a year before, a massive, bronze-skinned, eyes like fire, sword gleaming with cold light. But there was something different in his face now. The rage was still there, but it was older, colder, hardened into something like stone. "You came," the jinn said, and there was surprise in his voice, real surprise. "I gave my word," Salim said simply, standing up to face him. The jinn looked at him for a long moment. So few keep their word anymore. The world has become a place of lies and broken promises. But you are different. He raised his sword. Salim closed his eyes and waited for the end. "Wait," a voice said. Salim's eyes opened. The first old man had stepped forward, placing himself between Salim and the jinn. "Great one," the old man said, bowing slightly. "This man has kept his word at terrible cost. He has earned respect. Grant me a request before you take his life." The jinn lowered his sword slightly, curiosity flickering in his burning eyes. "Speak. Let me tell you a story," the old man said. "If my story amazes you, if it touches your heart, then forgive 1/3 of this man's debt. Let 1/3 of his crime be wiped away." The jinn was silent for a moment, considering. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well, I have time. The sun has not yet reached the correct angle. Tell your story, old man. But know this, I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed every form of human joy and suffering. If you think you can tell me something that will truly amaze me, you are either very brave or very foolish." The first old man smiled faintly. "Perhaps I am both." He gestured to the gazelle, and the creature stood, moving to stand beside him. In the fading light, her eyes seemed almost human, filled with sorrow and memory and a strange, terrible wisdom. "This gazelle," the old man said softly, "is my wife." Chapter 4. The Tale of the Enchanted Wife. The jinn's eyes narrowed. The sword remained raised, but he made no move to strike. "Your wife," he repeated slowly. "Explain." The first old man nodded and began his tale, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of someone who has told this story many times in the silence of his own heart. "Many years ago," he began, "when my beard was still black and my back was still straight, I was married to a woman I loved more than life itself. Her name was Yasmin, and she was beautiful, not with the shallow beauty that fades with time, but with the deep beauty that comes from a kind heart and a gentle soul. We were happy together. We laughed often. We spoke of growing old side by side, of watching our children have children, of becoming two trees with roots so intertwined they could never be separated." The old man paused, his hand resting gently on the gazelle's head. The creature pressed against his leg, and in that gesture Salim saw something heartbreaking. A tenderness, a familiarity, a love that had somehow survived transformation. "But we had no children," the old man continued. "Year after year passed, and Yasmin's womb remained empty. She wept often, believing herself cursed. I told her it did not matter, that she was enough for me, that I needed nothing else. And this was true, but in the world's eyes, a childless marriage is a failed marriage, and people began to whisper." He looked down at the gazelle, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, heavy with old pain. "My brother had a daughter. Her name was Zara. She had lived with us since she was a child, after her mother died. We raised her as our own, gave her everything, education, beautiful clothes, a place in our home and our hearts. She grew into a beautiful young woman, clever and talented in many things." The old man's jaw tightened. Too talented, too clever. She studied arts that should not be studied, books that should remain closed. She learned the secret names of things, the hidden properties of stones and herbs and stars. She became a sorceress. The jinn shifted slightly, his interest clearly caught. Even beings of smokeless fire respect the power of true magic. "I did not know this," the old man continued. "I saw her reading strange books, but I thought them merely poetry or philosophy. I saw her collecting odd things, feathers, stones, dried flowers, but I thought it a young woman's hobby. I did not see the truth until it was too late." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the memory pained him even now, decades later. Zara wanted to marry. There was a young man, the son of a wealthy merchant, handsome and well-mannered, but he did not want her. His eyes followed my wife wherever she went. He spoke to Yasmin with a softness he never used with Zara, and Zara saw this. She saw it, and it poisoned her heart. The gazelle made a small sound, not quite a bleat, not quite a cry. The old man stroked her neck, soothing her. One night I returned home late from a journey. The house was dark and silent, too silent. I called for my wife, but she did not answer. I searched every room, growing more frantic with each empty space. Finally, I found Zara in the courtyard, standing over something in the moonlight. The old man's voice dropped to barely a whisper. It was a gazelle. This gazelle. She looked at me with my wife's eyes, and I knew. Allah help me, I knew. Salim felt his breath catch. Around the fire, even the flames seemed to still, listening. I grabbed Zara by the shoulders. The old man said, "What have you done?" I demanded. "Where is Yasmin?" She smiled at me, smiled. "Your precious Yasmin is right here," she said, gesturing to the gazelle. "I have given her a form that matches her worth. She is beautiful to look at, but has no voice, no hands, no power. Perfect." The old man's hands clenched into fists, then slowly relaxed. I begged her to undo it. I offered her everything I owned. I wept at her feet, but she refused. "You loved her more than me," she said. "You gave her everything and gave me nothing but duty. Now she will know what it is to have nothing." He looked up at the jinn, his old eyes bright with unshed tears. But Zara's cruelty did not end there. You see, my wife and I had a son. I did not mention him before because... His voice broke. Because the pain is still too great. The gazelle pressed closer to him, as if trying to offer comfort. Our son was born late in our marriage. A miracle. A gift from heaven. He was only 2 years old when Zara cast her spell. The boy did not understand why his mother had suddenly become an animal. He cried for her constantly. He would not eat, would not sleep. He grew thinner and paler each day. The old man swallowed hard. I tried everything to help him. Every doctor, every wise woman, every healer in the city. Nothing worked. He was dying of grief, this child who loved his mother so much that he could not bear to exist without her. One day, I came home to find Zara in the stable. She was standing over a young calf, a beautiful calf with sad, intelligent eyes. "What have you done?" I screamed at her. "He was suffering," she said calmly. "I have ended his suffering. Now he is like his mother. They can be together." Salim felt sick. Beside him, the second and third old men sat in heavy silence, their own animals pressed close to them. "I threw Zara out of my house that day," the old man said. "I cursed her name. I told her never to return. She left laughing, telling me I should be grateful she had not turned me into an animal as well." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "For years I kept the gazelle and the calf with me always. I spoke to them as if they could understand, and I believed they could. I saw recognition in their eyes, love, sorrow. My wife trapped in an animal's body, my son transformed before he could even learn to write his own name." The campfire crackled softly. The sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and violet. Then, 5 years ago, we were traveling through a village in the south. An old woman saw us in the marketplace. She looked at the gazelle and the calf for a long time, then looked at me. "Those are not animals," she said. "Not truly." I asked her if she could help, hardly daring to hope. She said she could try. The old man's voice grew thick. She was a powerful sorceress, perhaps even more powerful than Zara. She worked for 3 days and 3 nights, burning incense, chanting in languages I did not know, drawing symbols in the sand. On the 4th morning, she came to me exhausted. "I have done what I can," she said. "The spell on the woman I cannot fully break, Whoever cast it was very skilled, and the magic has set too deep over so many years. She will remain a gazelle, but I have given her back her human mind fully. She can understand everything, remember everything. She is your wife in all ways but form." He stroked the gazelle's neck gently. "And the boy?" The old man's face crumpled. She said nothing, just shook her head. I ran to the stable. The calf was gone, in its place. He stopped, unable to continue for a moment. In its place was a pool of water, nothing more. The sorceress told me the transformation had happened too young, lasted too long. There was not enough of his human soul left to save. It had dissolved. My son was gone, truly gone. Silence fell over the oasis. Deep, aching silence. "So now I travel," the old man said quietly, "with my wife beside me. She cannot speak, but we have learned other ways to communicate. A look, a gesture, a touch. We have been together for 40 years in her true form, and 15 years in this one. I will not abandon her. I will not leave her. We will be together until death finally separates us, and perhaps not even then." He looked up at the djinn, his eyes fierce despite their tears. "So, you see, Great One, I understand your grief. I too lost a child. I too carry that wound every day. But unlike you, I did not seek revenge. I did not demand death for death. I chose to love what remained, to cherish what I could still hold, rather than destroy in the name of justice." The djinn stood very still. Something in his bronze face had changed, softened perhaps, or broken in some small way. The gazelle stepped forward, approaching the djinn without fear. She looked up at him with her large dark eyes, eyes that held decades of sorrow and wisdom. Then she bowed her head, as if in respect or sympathy or understanding. The djinn lowered his sword completely. When he spoke, his voice was rough, almost gentle. "Old man, your story has touched something in me I thought was dead. Your faithfulness shames my rage. Your love mocks my thirst for vengeance." He turned to Salim. "1/3 of your debt is forgiven. You have this man and his enchanted wife to thank." The first old man bowed deeply. "Thank you, Great One." But the second old man was already standing, his 2 black dogs rising with him. "Great Djinn," he said, "I too have a story. Will you hear it? Will you consider forgiving another 1/3 of this merchant's debt if my tale amazes you as well?" The djinn looked at the 2 dogs. They stared back at him with unsettling intelligence, unblinking. "Very well," the djinn said. "The sun has not yet reached its mark. Speak." Chapter 5. The Tale of the Brother Dogs. The second old man gestured for everyone to sit again. The fire had burned low, and he added a few pieces of dried wood, sending sparks spiraling upward into the darkening sky. The 2 black dogs sat on either side of him, their eyes reflecting the flames like mirrors. "My story," the second old man began, "is about brotherhood, about trust, about the terrible things that family can do when greed enters the heart." He placed a hand on each dog's head, his touch gentle despite the weight of his words. "These 2 dogs are my brothers, my older brothers. The 3 of us were born to a merchant, much like this man here." He nodded toward Salim. "Our father was successful but not wealthy, comfortable but not rich. When he died, he left his business to be divided equally among the 3 of us." The old man's voice took on a bitter edge. "I was the youngest, barely 20 years old. I trusted my brothers completely. They were older, wiser, experienced in the ways of trade. When they suggested we pool our inheritance and work together, I agreed immediately. Why would I not? We were family. Blood was thicker than water, or so I believed." He paused, his jaw tightening with old anger. For 2 years we worked together, or rather, I worked while they managed the money. I traveled to distant cities, buying and selling, often gone for months at a time. I sent all profits back to them, trusting they were investing wisely, building our fortune. One of the dogs whined softly. The old man stroked its head absently. Then one day, I returned from a particularly long journey. I had been gone for 8 months, traveling through dangerous territories, crossing mountains and deserts, risking my life to secure valuable goods. I came home exhausted, thin, aged beyond my years, but proud. I had made more money than ever before. I had letters of credit from foreign princes. Our family business would be legendary. His voice dropped. But when I reached our home city, I found our shop shuttered, our warehouse empty, the house where we had grown up together, sold. I searched frantically for my brothers, asking everyone, growing more desperate with each shake of the head, each, I don't know. The campfire popped, sending up another shower of sparks. The djinn listened silently, his burning eyes fixed on the old man's face. Finally, I found someone who would talk, a servant who had worked for us, now unemployed and bitter. He told me everything. My brothers had spent the money. All of it. They had lived like princes while I risked my life in foreign lands. They had bought expensive homes, thrown lavish parties, kept mistresses, gambled fortunes on racing horses, and when the money ran out, they had sold everything. The business, the properties, even the furniture from our father's house. The old man's hands clenched. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they blamed me. They told everyone I had stolen the money, that I had run away with the profits. They ruined my name, destroyed my reputation. They made sure that no merchant in the city would ever trust me or do business with me again. He looked down at the dogs. In the firelight, their eyes seemed almost human, filled with shame and regret. I was devastated. I was young, foolish, trusting. I had nothing. No money, no reputation, no family. I thought about ending my life. I walked to the river one night, intending to throw myself in. His voice softened slightly, but as I stood on the bridge, I heard a voice. An old woman, wrapped in dark robes, was watching me. "You plan to waste your life because others betrayed you?" she asked. "That is the coward's way. The brave man rebuilds, the wise man learns, the strong man survives and thrives, despite those who tried to destroy him." The second old man smiled faintly at the memory. She was right, of course. So instead of drowning myself, I left the city. I went far away, to places where no one knew my name or my family's shame. I started over with nothing, less than nothing. I worked as a porter, carrying heavy loads for pennies. I worked as a stable hand, shoveling dung. I worked as a sailor, scrubbing decks and climbing masts in storms that would have terrified my brothers. His voice grew stronger, and slowly, coin by coin, I rebuilt. I saved every penny. I slept in cheap rooms, ate simple food, wore the same clothes until they fell apart. After 3 years, I had enough to buy a small amount of merchandise. After 5 years, I had a modest trading business. After 10 years, I was wealthy again, wealthier than I had ever been with my brothers. One of the dogs pressed against his leg. He absently scratched behind its ears. I did not forget about them. How could I? Every success I achieved was sweeter because they had tried to destroy me and failed. Every coin I earned was a repudiation of their lies. I asked about them occasionally, through intermediaries. I learned they had squandered everything, of course. Without me to actually earn the money, they had nothing. They were living in poverty, barely surviving. The djinn shifted slightly. "And you came back to them?" The old man nodded. "Yes. After 15 years away, I returned to my home city. I was now 50 years old, wealthy, respected under the new name I had taken. No one recognized me as the disgraced youngest brother of that ruined family. He looked directly at the djinn. I searched for my brothers and found them living in a slum near the docks. They were gaunt, dressed in rags, working at the most degrading jobs even poorer men avoided. They looked 20 years older than they were. Hard living and guilt had aged them terribly. The second old man's voice became very quiet. I approached them in disguise. I told them I was a merchant looking for partners, men who knew the city and could help me establish my business. They did not recognize me. Why would they? I was fat and well-dressed. They were thin and desperate. 15 years had changed us all. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. I offered them a generous partnership. I gave them money to buy decent clothes, to rent a proper house, to live like human beings again. They wept with gratitude. They swore they would be loyal, honest, trustworthy. They promised to work hard, to make me proud. The dogs lowered their heads as if in shame. For 3 months I watched them carefully. I tested them in small ways, leaving money where they could take it, creating opportunities for small betrayals. They passed every test. They seemed genuinely changed, humbled by their years of poverty. The old man's voice hardened. So I revealed myself. I told them who I truly was. I watched the shock, the recognition, the fear cross their faces. I have forgiven you, I told them. I have given you another chance. Everything I have done for you these past 3 months proves my forgiveness is real. We can be brothers again. We can be family. He stopped, and in that silence, Salim could feel what was coming. The weight of it, the inevitability. They thanked me, the old man continued. They wept and embraced me and swore eternal loyalty. For 6 more months, we worked together. The business prospered. I began to think perhaps people really could change, that suffering really could teach wisdom. One of the dogs whimpered. The sound was heartbreaking, so human in its grief. Then one morning, I woke up in an alley, stripped of everything. My fine clothes were gone, my money pouch, stolen. Even my shoes had been taken. I had been drugged the night before. My brothers had put something in my wine, waited for me to collapse, then robbed me and left me for dead. The old man's voice shook with emotion. But I was not dead. I dragged myself to the house where we had been living together. It was empty. They had taken everything, all the merchandise, all the money, all the goods. The landlord told me they had left before dawn, laughing, talking about the fool who had trusted them twice. The djinn leaned forward slightly. And then I met her again. The old woman from the bridge. She found me in the street, beaten and robbed for the second time by the same people. You gave them mercy, she said, and they repaid you with betrayal. Some people cannot be saved. Some souls are too twisted by their own choices to ever straighten again. The second old man reached down and placed a hand on each dog's head. She was a powerful sorceress. She had been watching me for years, she said, watching my struggle, my success, my foolish mercy. Your brothers do not deserve your forgiveness, she told me. They deserve to understand what they are. Let me show them. He looked at the djinn steadily. She transformed them. Not as punishment, she said, but as revelation. She made their outer forms match their inner nature, loyal as dogs when it served them, feral when it did not. She cursed them to walk on 4 legs, to eat scraps, to know the vulnerability of creatures that depend on others for survival. The dogs sat perfectly still, their heads bowed. But here is the strange part, the old man said softly. She gave me a choice. You can leave them to wander as strays, she said, or you can keep them with you. And I... He paused, his voice breaking slightly. I chose to keep them." Salim felt his eyes burn with unexpected tears. "Why?" he whispered. The old man looked at him. "Because they are still my brothers. Because I remember the boys they were before greed poisoned them. Because leaving them would make me as heartless as they were cruel. Because—" he swallowed hard. "Because I am old now, and they are all the family I have left in this world. Even like this." He looked up at the jinn. "So I travel with them. I feed them. I protect them. And sometimes, late at night, I see something in their eyes. Shame, perhaps. Regret. The awareness of what they lost, what they threw away twice. The curse forces them to remember their human lives while living as animals. The sorceress said that was the truest punishment, to know what you were and can never be again." The second old man took a shaky breath. "So you see, great jinn, I too know about betrayal. I too carry grief. I was wronged not once but twice by the same people. I had every right to seek revenge, to demand justice, to watch them suffer. But instead, I chose mercy. Difficult, painful, complicated mercy. Not because they deserved it, but because revenge would have made me into the very thing I hated." He met the jinn's burning gaze directly. "Your son is dead, and that is a terrible tragedy. But killing this merchant will not bring your boy back. It will not ease your pain. It will not fill the emptiness in your heart. It will only add more death to the world, more grief, more suffering." The silence that followed was profound. The sun had nearly reached its final angle, the shadows growing long across the oasis. The spring murmured its endless song. The palm fronds whispered overhead. Finally the jinn spoke, his voice rougher than before, thick with something that might have been tears if jinn could weep. "Old man, your story cuts deeper than any blade. Your mercy shames my vengeance. Your forgiveness mocks my justice." He turned to Salim again. "Another third of your debt is forgiven. 2/3 of your crime has been erased. But 1/3 remained, 1/3 that still demanded death." The third old man slowly stood, his mule shifting behind him. "Great jinn," he said, his voice cracked with age but strong with purpose. "I too have a story. Will you hear it?" The jinn looked at him, at the mule, then at the sun rapidly approaching its fatal angle. "Speak quickly then, the time of judgment is almost here." Chapter 6. The Tale of the Mule-Wife. The third old man was the oldest of the three. His beard was completely white, his back bent with age, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured. But his eyes were sharp, glittering with intelligence and something else, something darker, harder, like stones at the bottom of a deep well. "My story," he began, "is about love and betrayal, like my companions' tales, but it is also about justice and revenge. Perhaps it will not move you to mercy, great jinn. Perhaps it will instead confirm your belief that some debts must be paid in blood." He moved slowly to stand beside the mule. The animal watched him with an expression that might have been fear or might have been resignation. The old man placed his hand on its neck, not gently like the first old man with his gazelle, but firmly, like a jailer holding a prisoner. "This mule," he said, "is my wife, or rather, she was my wife. Now she is my servant, my beast of burden, my constant reminder of the price of treachery." The jinn's eyes narrowed with interest. Even the other two old men leaned forward slightly, sensing that this tale would be different from theirs, darker, perhaps less gentle. 40 years ago, the third old man began, I was a successful trader in a prosperous city. I had wealth, respect, a beautiful home, and I had a wife. The most beautiful woman in the city, or so everyone said. Her name was Noor, which means light, and she did seem to glow when she entered a room. Men would stop their conversations to watch her pass. Poets wrote verses about her beauty. His voice took on a bitter edge. I was proud of her, foolishly proud. I thought myself blessed among men to have such a wife. I showered her with gifts, jewels, silk dresses, perfumes from distant lands. I denied her nothing. I loved her with the blind devotion of a man who believes that beauty and virtue must go together. The mule stamped its foot. The old man's hand tightened on its neck. But beauty and virtue are not the same thing, as I learned. Beauty can hide a rotting soul, just as ornate cloth can cover a festering wound. He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as if chewing on bitter memories. I began to notice small things. She was often tired in the mornings, as if she had not slept well. She wore heavier perfumes, as if covering some other scent. She started at sudden sounds. She made excuses to be alone at odd hours. The third old man looked at the djinn. But I ignored these signs. I told myself I was imagining things, being jealous without cause. What wife as beautiful as Noor would ever betray a husband as devoted as I was? It was unthinkable. His voice grew colder. One night I told her I would be traveling to a nearby city on business, that I would be gone for 3 days. She kissed me goodbye with such tenderness that I felt ashamed of my suspicions. But I did not leave. I hid myself near our house and waited. The campfire crackled. The sun was now very close to its fatal angle. Perhaps 10 more minutes remained. That same night, after she believed me gone, I watched her leave our house dressed in a dark cloak. I followed her through the streets. She moved quickly, confidently, like someone who had made this journey many times before. She led me to the poor quarter of the city, to a dilapidated building I would never have entered voluntarily. The old man's hands clenched into fists. She knocked on a door in a pattern, 3 quick, 2 slow, 1 quick. The door opened. A man stood there, not a wealthy man, not even a particularly handsome man. He was my slave, a man I had purchased years before, a man who worked in my stables, who I had treated with reasonable kindness. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. She walked into his arms, she kissed him, and then the door closed behind them. Salim felt his stomach turn. Beside him, the first and second old men sat in heavy silence, their animals pressed close. I stood in that alley for hours, the third old man continued. I did not know what to do. My mind was full of rage but also shame. My wife was betraying me with my own slave. How long had this been happening? How many times had I slept peacefully while she crept out to meet him? How many people knew? How many were laughing at me behind my back? He looked up at the darkening sky. When dawn began to break, she emerged from the building, adjusting her cloak, her face flushed. She hurried home. I followed at a distance and arrived shortly after her. She had already undressed and climbed into bed, pretending to be asleep. The mule made a low sound, almost like a moan. The old man ignored it. I confronted her. I told her what I had seen. She denied it at first, then grew angry, angry that I had spied on her, angry that I had followed her, as if I were the one who had done wrong. Finally, when she could deny it no longer, she laughed. She actually laughed. His voice shook with remembered rage. "You are old," she told me. "You are boring. You are more interested in your ledgers than in me. He makes me feel alive. He makes me feel wanted. Why should I deny myself pleasure just because you signed a contract to own me?" The third old man's eyes glittered dangerously. That was when I noticed the books on her table. Books I had not seen before. Books with strange symbols on their covers. "What are these?" I demanded. She smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "Insurance," she said. "I have been studying the secret arts. If you try to punish me or divorce me or harm my lover, I will destroy you. I will turn you into something that crawls in the dirt. I have that power now." He paused, his breathing heavy. To prove her point, she spoke a few words in a language I did not know. I felt my body begin to change. My hands became paws. My face stretched into a snout. She was turning me into a dog, but then she stopped, letting me return to human form. "See," she said, "I could do it. I could transform you into anything I wish. So you will do nothing. You will say nothing. You will continue to be my wealthy, foolish husband while I live my real life elsewhere." The jinn leaned forward. "But you did not accept this." "No," the old man said flatly. "I did not. I left the house. I traveled for months, searching for someone who could help me. Finally, in a distant mountain village, I found a sorceress, ancient, powerful, frightening. I told her my story. She listened without comment, then named her price. It was steep, half my wealth, but I paid it gladly." His hand tightened on the mule's neck again. "The sorceress gave me an amulet that would protect me from my wife's magic. Then she taught me a spell, just one spell but a powerful one. A transformation spell that would work only once, but could not be reversed by anyone except the sorceress herself." The third old man's voice became very soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening. "I returned home after 6 months. My wife was surprised to see me. She had thought I had run away in fear. She was standing in our bedroom with her lover, my slave, both of them laughing at my return. 'Have you come back to beg for mercy?' she asked. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I spoke the spell. Before she could react, before she could speak her own magic words, the transformation began. She screamed as her body changed. Her lover tried to run, but I had locked the doors. He too felt the magic take hold. The old man gestured to the mule. She became this, and the old man paused. He became the water trough from which she drinks. Every day she must lower her head to drink from what was once her lover. Every day she remembers what they both lost. Silence fell over the oasis. It was not the gentle silence of the other tales, but a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The silence that comes when people do not know whether to feel sympathy or horror. "For 40 years, the third old man said, she has been my mule. She carries my burdens. She goes where I command. She eats what I provide. And every day she knows who she was and what she did, and why this happened to her. The sorceress made sure the curse would preserve her human mind, just as with the first old man's wife. But unlike that tale of faithful love, mine is a tale of justice." He looked at the jinn directly. "You seek revenge for your son's death, great jinn. I understand that. I too sought revenge for a betrayal. But here's what I have learned over 40 years of traveling with my transformed wife. Revenge does not heal. It does not bring peace. It does not fill the emptiness. Every day I look at this mule and remember my pain. Every day the wound is fresh again. My revenge has trapped me as surely as the spell trapped her." The third old man's voice cracked slightly. "If I could go back, if I could choose again, I would have simply divorced her, left her to her fate, started over somewhere else. The revenge I took has become a prison for us both. She is trapped in an animal's body, and I am trapped in the role of her eternal jailer. Neither of us can ever be free." He fell silent. The mule lowered its head, its eyes closing as if in exhaustion or defeat. The jinn stood very still, his sword point resting on the ground. The sun had reached its final angle, the exact position it had been in 1 year ago, when Salim had thrown the date pit that killed the jinn's son. The moment of judgment had arrived. Chapter 7. The Jinn's Choice. The oasis had grown quiet in the way places become quiet when something momentous is about to happen. The palm fronds stopped rustling. The spring seemed to hold its breath. Even the small night insects that had begun their evening songs fell silent, as if the world itself was waiting to see what the Jinn would decide. The great being stood motionless, his sword still resting point down on the earth. The firelight played across his bronze skin, making the muscles of his arms and chest seem to ripple like water. His eyes, those pools of liquid flame, stared at nothing and everything, looking inward at thoughts too ancient and complex for mortal minds to fully grasp. Salim watched him and felt strangely calm. He had kept his word. He had said goodbye to his family. He had lived his final year with purpose and presence. If death came now, it would come to a man who had nothing left undone, nothing left unsaid. There was peace in that, he discovered. A deep, unexpected peace. The first old man still stood beside his gazelle, one hand resting gently on her neck. The creature's eyes were fixed on the Jinn with an expression that might have been pleading or might have been understanding. It was hard to tell. The second old man sat with his two dogs pressed against his legs, one on each side. Their heads were bowed, their ears flat against their skulls, as if they could sense the weight of the moment and felt the shame of their own story afresh. The third old man remained standing beside his mule, his hand still firm on the animal's neck, but something in his posture had changed during the telling of his tale. His shoulders were less squared, his spine less rigid, as if some burden he had carried for 40 years had finally become too heavy to hold upright any longer. The Jinn finally moved. He lifted his head and looked at each of them in turn, the gazelle, the dogs, the mule. Then his gaze traveled to the three old men, studying their faces in the firelight. Finally, his burning eyes settled on Salim. "Merchant," the Jinn said, and his voice was different now, quieter, less like thunder, more like distant wind through canyon rocks. "Do you know what I have learned tonight?" Salim shook his head slowly. "No, Great One. I have learned," the Jinn continued, "that grief is not unique. I have learned that loss is a language spoken by all living things. I have learned that the wound I carry, the hole my son's death carved in my heart, is not mine alone. Every creature that loves must eventually lose. Every being that bonds must eventually break." He gestured with his free hand toward the three old men and their animals. "These men have shown me pain I thought only I could feel. They have shown me betrayal, transformation, loss beyond measure. They have shown me that the universe does not single out Jinn for suffering. It distributes sorrow with cruel equality." The Jinn's voice grew softer still. "But they have also shown me something else, something I had forgotten in my years of rage and grief. They have shown me that how we carry our pain matters, that the choices we make in response to suffering define us more than the suffering itself." He looked at the first old man. "You could have abandoned your wife when she was transformed. You could have taken another bride, had other children, built a new life. Instead, you chose fidelity. You chose to love what remained rather than grieve what was lost. Your devotion humbles me." The first old man bowed his head. The gazelle pressed closer to his side, and in that simple gesture, Salim saw decades of love made visible. The Jinn turned to the second old man. "You were betrayed not once but twice by those you loved most. You had every right to walk away, to let your brothers starve in the streets, to turn your back on family that had destroyed you. Instead, you chose mercy, difficult, complicated, painful mercy. You carry them with you still, even transformed, even shameful, because they are your brothers, and you will not abandon them. Your forgiveness shames my vengeance." The second old man said nothing, but tears slipped quietly down his weathered cheeks. The two dogs whined softly, pressing even closer to him, as if seeking forgiveness they did not know how to ask for. Then the Jinn looked at the third old man, and his expression became more complex. Not anger exactly, but something like recognition. Something like seeing himself reflected in dark water. "You chose revenge," the Jinn said. "You transformed your betrayer into a beast of burden and have kept her that way for 40 years. You did what I am about to do. You took a life in payment for a wrong. You exacted justice as you understood it." The third old man nodded slowly. "Yes." "And are you satisfied?" the Jinn asked. "After 40 years, has your revenge brought you peace?" The question hung in the air. The third old man opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. No, that single word seemed to cost him everything. His shoulders sagged. His hand slipped from the mule's neck. He looked suddenly older, more fragile, as if acknowledging this truth had broken something inside him that had been holding him together for decades. "No," he repeated louder now. "I am not satisfied. I am not at peace. Every day I wake and see her and I remember my pain. Every day I feed her and water her and I remember my humiliation. Every day she looks at me with those eyes, her eyes trapped in an animal's face, and I see my own cruelty reflected back at me. My revenge did not heal me. It infected me. It became a poison I have been drinking for 40 years, thinking it would quench my thirst for justice. But instead, it has only made me more parched, more bitter, more alone." He turned to look at the mule directly. "I have carried this curse as much as she has, perhaps more because I chose it. I could have walked away. I could have built a new life. But I chose to chain myself to my anger, and now I am too old, too tired, too defined by this revenge to know who I would be without it." The mule raised its head and looked at the old man. In the firelight, Salim could have sworn he saw tears gathering in the animal's eyes. Real tears, human tears, impossible tears. The Jinn was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again, and now his voice carried a weight of sorrow that seemed to press down on the entire oasis, making the very air feel heavy. "I understand," the Jinn said quietly. "I understand because I have been where you are. For a year I have carried my grief like a sword, sharp and bright and ready to strike. I have imagined this moment 1,000 times, the moment when I would take the merchant's life and balance the scales. I told myself his death would honor my son. I told myself justice demanded blood." He looked down at his sword. "But these stories tonight have shown me the truth I did not want to see. My son's death was an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. The merchant threw a stone without knowing, without malice, without intent to harm. He is no more responsible for my son's death than the wind is responsible for where the sand blows." The Jinn's hand trembled on the sword hilt. "If I kill him, I do not bring my son back. I do not heal my wound. I only create new grief, a wife without a husband, children without a father, a good man dead for the crime of eating a date, and I will carry that death with me forever, just as this old man carries his revenge, just as my grief carries me. I will become a creature of vengeance, defined entirely by what I have lost rather than what I once loved." He lifted his sword from the ground. Salim closed his eyes, ready for whatever would come. But the Jinn did not strike. Instead, there was a sound like metal singing, like a blade cutting through more than air. cutting through anger, through grief, through the chains of vengeance itself. Salim opened his eyes to see the jinn driving his sword deep into the earth. He pushed it down until only the hilt remained visible, the blade buried in the sand and stone of the oasis as if planting a tree that would never grow. "I forgive the final third," the jinn said, his voice ringing across the oasis. "The debt is paid, not with blood, but with wisdom, not with death, but with mercy. You are free, merchant. Go home to your family, live well, love deeply, and remember that a thrown stone taught a jinn to set down his sword." Salim felt his legs give way. He sank to his knees, not in supplication, but in simple relief, in the overwhelming release of a year's worth of tension and fear. He pressed his hands against the cool grass and breathed, just breathed, feeling air fill his lungs, feeling his heartbeat, feeling alive in a way he had not allowed himself to feel for 12 long months. The first old man stepped forward, his gazelle beside him. He placed a gentle hand on Salim's shoulder. "Rise, friend. You are reborn tonight." Salim stood on shaking legs. He looked at the jinn, this enormous being who had held his life in those bronze hands, and chosen to open them and let it go. "Thank you," Salim whispered. "Great One, thank you." The jinn shook his head. "Do not thank me. Thank these 3 men and their companions. They are the ones who taught me what I needed to learn. They paid your debt with their stories." He turned to face the 3 old men. "You have given me a gift tonight. You have shown me that carrying grief does not require carrying vengeance. You have shown me that love can survive transformation, that mercy can survive betrayal, and that revenge survives only by devouring the one who seeks it." The jinn looked at the 3rd old man specifically. "Old man, you said you were trapped by your choice, that you did not know who you would be without your revenge." The 3rd old man nodded. "Yes. Then let me give you a gift in return for the gift you gave me." The jinn raised his hand, and the air began to shimmer around the mule. "I am not the sorceress who cast this spell, but I am a being of smokeless fire, older than mountains, and I know the true names of many things. I can break this curse." The 3rd old man's eyes widened. You can?" "Yes, but I will not do it without your permission. This is your revenge, your justice, your prison. Only you can choose to walk away from it." The old man stared at the mule. She stared back at him. 40 years of complicated history passed between them in that look. Betrayal and revenge, cruelty and punishment, jailer and prisoner bound together by chains of their own forging. "If you free her," the old man said slowly, "she will leave. She will never speak to me again. I will be alone." "Yes," the jinn agreed, "very likely. And I will have nothing. No wife, no revenge, no purpose. I will just be an old man with nothing left to define me." "Yes," the jinn said again, "you will be free to discover who you are when you are not carrying your pain. It is terrifying, I know, but it is also a gift." The 3rd old man stood very still. Salim could see the battle playing out across his weathered face, the desire to hold on to what was familiar even if it was toxic, versus the yearning for something new, something clean, something that did not taste like poison every morning. Finally, the old man closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was something different there, something like resignation, or perhaps like hope. It was hard to tell the difference. "Do it," he whispered. "Break the curse. Let her go. Let us both go." The jinn nodded once. Then he spoke a word. A single word in a language older than human speech. A word that resonated not in the air, but in the bones, in the blood, in the deep places where magic lives. the mule began to change. Chapter 8. Transformations. The transformation was not sudden, not violent. It was more like watching dawn break, a gradual shifting from one state to another, inevitable and gentle and utterly irreversible. The mule's body began to shimmer, its outline becoming uncertain, as if it were being viewed through heat ripples rising from desert sand. The coarse hair that covered its hide seemed to dissolve into smoke, revealing skin beneath, human skin, pale from 40 years of being covered, but unmistakably human. The long muzzle shortened, became a nose, a mouth, a chin. The large dark eyes remained the same. They had always been human eyes, even in an animal's face, but now they were framed by a woman's face. Not young anymore, not the beauty she had once been. 40 years had passed after all, even if she had spent them in animal form. Her body unfolded from 4 legs to 2, from hooves to feet, from bent spine to upright posture. She stood naked and trembling in the firelight, her arms wrapped around herself, her long gray hair falling across her shoulders like a tattered curtain. For a long moment, no one moved. The woman who had been a mule stood frozen, staring down at her hands, her human hands with their 5 fingers, their opposable thumbs, their ability to grasp and hold and create. She turned them over slowly, as if unable to believe they were real. Then she looked up at the 3rd old man. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw, rusty, like a door that had not been opened in decades. "Rashid," she whispered. Just his name, nothing more. The old man, Rashid, stood very still. His face was unreadable in the flickering firelight. Salim could not tell if he felt regret, relief, anger, or some complicated mixture of all 3. The 2nd old man quietly removed his outer robe and handed it to the woman. She took it gratefully, wrapping it around herself with shaking hands. The simple act of holding cloth, of draping it over her shoulders, of tying it closed, these tiny gestures seemed to overwhelm her. Tears began to stream down her face. 40 years, she said, her voice breaking. 40 years I could not speak, could not explain, could not apologize, could not beg forgiveness. I could only carry burdens and eat grass and drink water and remember everything I had been and everything I had lost. She took a step toward Rashid, then stopped uncertain. "I was wrong," she said. "What I did to you was cruel. I was young and foolish and drunk on beauty and power. I thought I deserved more than you gave me. I thought I was entitled to whatever pleasure I could find. I did not understand that I was destroying something precious. I did not understand until it was too late, until I was trapped, until every day for 40 years I had to live with what I had done." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I am sorry. I know it means nothing now. I know it does not undo the harm, but I am sorry." Rashid's face worked, emotions flickering across it too quickly to name. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with 40 years of unshed tears. "I was wrong too," he said. "What you did was cruel, but what I did in response— 40 years, Noor. I kept you suffering for 40 years. I told myself it was justice, but it was not. It was cruelty answering cruelty. It was pain breeding more pain. We destroyed each other, and I could have stopped it at any time, but I did not. I chose to keep us both trapped in that moment of betrayal, living it over and over, never moving forward, never healing." He took a step toward her, then stopped, mirroring her hesitation. "I am sorry too, for all of it, for the revenge, for the years, for becoming someone defined entirely by what you did to me rather than who I chose to be." They stood facing each other across the small distance that felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Neither moved to close the gap. Too much history stood between them. Betrayal and revenge, 40 years of silence, 4 decades of daily humiliation and daily rage. Noor finally spoke again. "I will go now. I will leave you in peace. You have given me back my human form. That is more than I deserved. I will not ask for anything more." She turned to the jinn and bowed deeply. "Thank you, Great One. Thank you for mercy I did not earn." Then she turned to Salim and bowed to him as well. "And thank you, merchant, for keeping your word. If you had not come back to face your death with honor, these stories would not have been told, and I would have remained a mule until I died. Your integrity freed me." She looked at the first old man and his gazelle, at the second old man and his dogs. "And thank you, all of you, for your stories, for your witness, for being here tonight." Finally, she turned back to Rashid one last time. "I hope you find peace. I hope you discover who you are without your revenge to define you. I hope you find happiness in whatever years remain." She began to walk away, her steps unsteady. She had not walked on 2 legs in 40 years after all. The night had grown deep around them, and beyond the circle of firelight the desert stretched vast and dark and empty. "Wait," Rashid called out. Noor stopped but did not turn around. "Where will you go?" Rashid asked. "You have nothing. No home, no family, no way to survive. You are an old woman alone in the world." "I know," Noor said quietly, "but I have been alone for 40 years already, even when I was beside you. At least now I am alone in human form. At least now I can speak, can think, can choose my own path, even if it is a difficult one." Rashid was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tentative, uncertain, like someone taking the first steps on a rope bridge over a deep canyon. "You could—" He stopped, started again. "We could travel together, not as husband and wife. Those people are dead, buried under 40 years of mistakes, but as 2 old people who once knew each other, who share a history, even if it is painful, who might possibly learn to be something other than what we were. Friends, perhaps, or at least not enemies." Noor turned slowly to face him. Her eyes were wide with surprise. "You would want that? After everything?" Rashid gestured helplessly. "I do not know what I want. I have spent 40 years knowing exactly what I wanted. Revenge, justice, your suffering. Now that is gone and I feel empty, unmoored, lost. But perhaps we could be lost together. Perhaps we could learn together who we are supposed to be now." He looked down at his hands, these hands that had held a mule's lead rope for so long. "I am tired, Noor. I am tired of carrying anger. I am tired of being defined by the worst thing that ever happened to me. I want—" His voice broke. "I want to try to be someone else, someone better, and perhaps I cannot do that alone." Noor stood very still. Tears continued to stream down her face, but something else was there now too, something that might have been hope, fragile as a bird's egg, as impossible and precious. "I would like that," she whispered. I think I would like that very much." She walked back toward him, slow and careful, giving him time to change his mind, time to step away. But he did not step away. He stood his ground, and when she reached him, he tentatively held out his hand. She looked at it for a long moment. This hand that had controlled her for 40 years, that had held her lead rope, that had determined where she went and what she did. Then she placed her hand in his, her newly returned human hand, with its ability to choose, to grasp, to let go. They stood there together, 2 old people who had destroyed each other and been destroyed in turn, now holding hands in the firelight like children learning to trust for the first time. The jinn watched them and nodded slowly. "This," he said quietly, is what I needed to see. Not the curse being broken, but what comes after. The hard work of building something new from the ruins of something broken. That takes more courage than revenge ever did. He turned to the first old man and his gazelle. And you, faithful one, you have carried your love through transformation and years and grief. You have shown tonight what devotion truly means. Would you accept a gift as well? The first old man looked up, hope and fear warring in his ancient eyes. Great one, I would not dare to ask. You do not need to ask, the Jinn said gently. Your story earned this. He raised his hand toward the gazelle, but before he could speak the word of transformation, the gazelle stepped back. She looked up at the first old man with those liquid brown eyes and shook her head, a very human gesture in an animal's body. The old man stared at her in confusion. Yasmin, you do not want to be human again? The gazelle stepped close to him and pressed her head against his chest. Then she looked up at the Jinn and made a soft sound, not quite words, but full of meaning nonetheless. The Jinn's expression became thoughtful. She says the transformation happened too long ago. 55 years she has been a gazelle. 55 years of seeing the world through different eyes, running on 4 legs instead of 2, living close to the earth and the sky. She says. He paused, listening to something the others could not hear. She says she has learned to be content in this form, that you love her as she is, that changing back now would mean losing all those years, all that wisdom, all the strange grace she has found in this shape. She says she would rather remain what she has become than try to recover what she was. The first old man's eyes filled with tears. Yasmin, are you certain? I want you to be happy, whatever form that takes. The gazelle pressed closer to him and made that soft sound again. The Jinn smiled, a real smile this time, not bitter or sad, but genuine and warm. She says she is happy. She says she has you, and that is enough. She says some transformations should not be reversed because they have become part of who we are. The old man wrapped his arms around the gazelle's neck and wept into her soft fur. She stood perfectly still, supporting his weight, comforting him in the way she had learned to comfort over decades of silent communication. Then I will give you a different gift, the Jinn said. He spoke another word, and the air shimmered around the gazelle. I have given her voice. Not human speech, she would not want that, but the ability to communicate more clearly with you. You will understand each other even better now. Your love will have more ways to express itself. The gazelle nuzzled the old man's face and made a sound that was still an animal sound, but somehow the old man's expression cleared, as if he had heard an entire sentence in that single syllable. Thank you, he whispered to her. Then to the Jinn, Thank you, Great One. This is better than anything I could have hoped for. The Jinn turned to the second old man and his 2 dogs. The dogs whimpered and pressed even closer to their brother's legs, their tails tucked, their ears flat. And you, the Jinn said, you carry brothers who betrayed you twice. You could have left them to starve in the streets as dogs. Instead, you keep them, feed them, protect them. Would you have me lift their curse as well? The second old man looked down at the dogs. They looked back up at him with eyes full of pleading and shame. He was quiet for a long time. I do not know, he finally admitted. Part of me wants to say yes. They are my brothers. I remember them as children before greed poisoned their hearts. I remember playing together, laughing together, protecting each other. I would like to have my brothers back. He paused, his hand resting on one dog's head. But another part of me remembers the betrayal, remembers the second betrayal, which was worse than the first because it showed they had learned nothing. that my forgiveness had meant nothing to them. If you transform them back, will they betray me again? Will I spend whatever years I have left waiting for the next knife in my back? The Jinn nodded slowly. These are fair questions. Let me ask them something. He crouched down, bringing his enormous face close to the two black dogs. He looked into their eyes and they stared back, unable to look away from those pools of liquid fire. When the Jinn stood again, his expression was somber. They understand now what they did. 15 years as dogs has taught them what they could not learn as men: dependence, vulnerability, gratitude. They understand that you could have left them to die, that you could have sold them or abandoned them or had them put down, but you did not. You kept them, fed them, protected them, and this has changed something in them. He looked at the second old man. But I will not transform them unless you wish it, and I will not do it completely. What do you mean? The old man asked. I will give them human form again, the Jinn said. But I will leave a mark, a reminder. When people look at them, they will see something that suggests the animal they were. Others will sense that these are men who were once something less. It will keep them humble. It will keep them honest, and it will serve as a warning to them and to the world that transformation is possible but never complete. We are always marked by what we have been. The second old man considered this. And if I say no, if I ask you to leave them as they are, then I will respect your choice, the Jinn said. This is your decision to make, not mine. The old man looked down at the dogs again. They gazed up at him, and in their eyes he saw something he had not seen before, not just shame, but genuine remorse, genuine gratitude, genuine love, twisted and complicated as it was. Do it, the old man said softly. Transform them. Give them another chance, not because they deserve it, but because I choose to believe that people, even terrible people, can learn, can change, can become better than they were. The Jinn nodded and spoke the words. Chapter 9. The Dawn of New Stories. The transformation of the two dogs was different from Noor's change. Where hers had been gradual and gentle, theirs was faster, more abrupt, as if the universe was impatient to return them to human form. Or perhaps it was simply that they had been animals for less time, only 15 years compared to Noor's 40. Their bodies stretched and twisted, fur receding, bones realigning, faces emerging from muzzles. Within moments, two men crouched where the dogs had been. Middle-aged men, naked and trembling, their heads bowed in shame or perhaps just disorientation. The first old man quietly removed his outer robe, and the second old man did the same. They handed them to the transformed brothers, who wrapped themselves gratefully, still not looking up, still not speaking. But the Jinn had spoken true. There were marks. One brother's eyes remained slightly too canine, too wide-set, giving his face a disconcerting quality that would make people uncomfortable without quite knowing why. The other brother's posture was wrong somehow, slightly hunched, as if his spine had not completely forgotten its four-legged configuration. Both moved with an odd, skittering quality, like animals not quite certain of their human form. Finally, the first brother, the one with the canine eyes, looked up at the second old man. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, cracked with years of disuse. "Brother," he whispered, "forgive us." The second old man stood looking down at them, his face unreadable. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled. The spring murmured. The night pressed close around their small circle of light. "I forgave you 15 years ago," the second old man finally said, "when I chose to keep you rather than abandon you. Forgiveness is not a feeling, It is a choice, a decision, an action. I made that choice then, but—" he paused and his voice became firmer. "But forgiveness does not mean blindness. It does not mean pretending the past did not happen. It does not mean trusting again as if you had never betrayed me. You will have to earn trust over years, through action, through consistency, through becoming men worthy of it. Do you understand?" Both brothers nodded, tears streaming down their changed faces. "We understand," the second brother, the one with the hunched posture, said. "We will spend whatever years remain proving we are worthy of your mercy, not because we deserve another chance, but because you gave us one anyway." The second old man's expression softened slightly. "Then stand up. Stand on your human legs. We have a long road ahead of us, all three of us, and it will not be walked on our knees." The brothers stood, shaky but upright, and for the first time in 15 years, the three of them faced each other as men. The Jinn watched all of this with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been sorrow. It was hard to tell with beings whose faces were cast in bronze and whose eyes burned with eternal fire. "Stories within stories," the Jinn murmured, almost to himself. "Transformations within transformations. Perhaps this is all that life ever is, the constant work of becoming something other than what we were, learning from what we have been, choosing what we will be next." He turned to Salim, who had been watching everything with a kind of awed silence. "And you, merchant, you came here tonight prepared to die, and instead you have witnessed rebirth. How does it feel?" Salim shook his head slowly, trying to find words for something that felt beyond language. I feel as if I have been given more than just my life back. I feel as if I have been given a story to carry, a reminder of what it means to keep your word, even when it costs you everything. A reminder that mercy is more powerful than vengeance, that forgiveness can break curses, that transformation is always possible." He looked around at the gathered company, the three old men, the gazelle, the newly human woman, and brothers. "All of you have given me a gift tonight. You saved my life, yes, but more than that, you showed me truths I will carry forever." The first old man smiled at him. "Then carry them well, friend. Tell your wife these stories. Tell your children. Let them know that in a desert oasis, on a night when justice could have meant death, mercy chose life instead." Salim nodded solemnly. "I will. I swear it." The Jinn looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to fade at the eastern horizon. Dawn was not far off. "It is time for me to go," he said. "I have been bound to this place for a year by my oath of vengeance. Now that oath is released and I am free to return to wherever beings like me go when we are not haunting oases and threatening merchants." He walked to where his sword stood buried in the earth. He grasped the hilt and pulled, expecting resistance, but the blade slid free easily, as if the earth had been holding it only lightly, ready to let it go at any moment. The Jinn looked at the sword for a long moment, this weapon that had been going to take Salim's life, that had hung over the merchant's head for an entire year, like a suspended doom. Then, in a motion almost too quick to see, the Jinn brought the blade down on a large rock near the spring. The sword shattered. Pieces of metal flew in all directions, ringing as they hit stone and sand. The blade that had been forged in fires hotter than any human smithy could create, that had been carried for 3,000 years, that had ended countless lives. It broke like glass, like ice, like something that had been waiting to break for a very long time. The Jinn stood holding only the hilt, looking at it with an expression of profound relief. "Some weapons," he said quietly. are meant to be broken. Some tools of vengeance must be destroyed before their wielder can be free. He tossed the hilt into the spring, where it sank without a splash, disappearing into the dark water. He turned to face all of them one last time. "Thank you," he said, and his voice carried genuine warmth, genuine gratitude. "Thank you for teaching an old jinn new wisdom. Thank you for showing me that carrying grief does not require carrying a sword. Thank you for these stories that I will remember long after you have all turned to dust and your grandchildren's grandchildren have been forgotten." Rashid stepped forward, Noor beside him. "Great One, before you go, may I ask what happened to your son? I mean, what was he like? We have told you our stories, our griefs, our losses. Would you honor us by sharing something of him?" The jinn was still for a moment. Then, slowly he smiled, a sad smile, but genuine. His name was Zahir, which means shining or brilliant. He was young, only 60 years old, practically an infant for our kind. He loved music. He could hear the songs in the wind, in the water, in the movement of stars across the sky. He would sit for hours listening to sounds no human ear could detect, and he would hum along, adding his voice to the great symphony of the world. The jinn's eyes grew distant with memory. He was kind, too kind perhaps for a being of fire. He befriended insects, spoke gently to plants, mourned when flowers wilted. He believed the world was beautiful and that beauty was sacred. He saw wonder everywhere. A single tear, golden and bright, slid down the jinn's bronze cheek. He came to this oasis because he loved the sound of the spring. He said it sang a song of contentment, of water finding its way home after a long journey through darkness underground. He would rest here often, invisible, just listening, just being, and then a stone, thrown without thought, without malice, without any awareness that he was there, and the song stopped, the kindness stopped, the wonder stopped. The jinn wiped the golden tear away. "For a year I blamed the merchant, but tonight I have learned something. My son died because he was fragile and the world is hard, because coincidences happen, because tragedy does not require a villain. Sometimes it just requires bad timing and bad luck. Killing the merchant would not bring back my son's song. It would only silence another voice, remove another light from the world. And my son, who loved all living things, would not have wanted that." He looked at Salim. "So thank you, merchant, for being the kind of man who keeps his word, for being someone worth sparing, for being living proof that honor still exists in this world. My son would have liked you, I think. He would have listened to your story and heard beauty in it, the beauty of integrity, of love strong enough to face death, of a man who chose to die rather than become a liar." Salim felt tears on his own face now. "I will remember him," he promised. "Zahir, who loved music and beauty, I will tell my children about him. I will make sure his name is not forgotten." The jinn bowed his head in gratitude. "Then he lives on, not in the way I would have chosen, but in a way that matters, in stories, in memory, in the ripples his brief life created in the world." The eastern sky was growing lighter, shading from black to deep blue to violet. Dawn was coming, inevitable and beautiful. "I must go now," the jinn said. "The sun is about to rise, and I wish to see it from somewhere high and clean and new, somewhere that does not taste of grief." He began to fade, his form becoming translucent, becoming smoke, becoming shadow. But before he disappeared completely, his voice came one last time, echoing across the oasis like wind through canyons. "Remember these stories. Remember that every being you meet carries hidden transformations. Remember that mercy breaks curses. Remember that vengeance imprisons the one who seeks it. Remember that love survives anything, even death, even change, even betrayal, if it is tended with patience and hope. Remember all of this and tell it to anyone who will listen. This is my gift to you, the gift of these tales, earned with truth and pain and courage. Carry them well. And then he was gone, vanished like morning mist, like smoke from a dying fire, like a dream remembered only in fragments. Chapter 10. The Morning After Miracles. The sun rose slowly, as it always does, indifferent to the dramas that unfold beneath it. First came the pale gray light that makes everything look ghostly and uncertain. Then the horizon began to glow with subtle colors, pink and peach and the palest gold. Finally, the sun itself appeared, a burning coin on the edge of the world, and warmth began to spread across the desert like a blessing. The 6 people gathered around the dying campfire watched the sunrise in silence. Each of them was transformed in ways both visible and invisible. Each carried something they had not carried the night before: freedom, forgiveness, hope, or simply the strange lightness that comes when a burden you have carried so long you forgot it was heavy is finally set down. Salim was the first to speak. "I should go," he said quietly. "My family believes I am dead. Every moment I delay is another moment they grieve unnecessarily. I need to return to them, to show them I am alive, to—" His voice caught, "to hold my children again." The first old man nodded, his hand resting on his gazelle's neck. "Yes, go to them. Run if you can. Do not waste a single moment of the life you have been given back." Salim stood, brushing sand from his robe. He looked at each of them in turn, these strangers who had become something more than strangers through the sharing of stories and the witnessing of transformations. "I do not even know your names," he said. "You saved my life, and I do not know what to call you." The first old man smiled. "My name is Farid. And this," he gestured to the gazelle, "is Yasmin, my wife of 55 years in one form or another." The gazelle made a soft sound, melodious, almost like speech, but not quite. Somehow, Salim understood that she was greeting him, blessing his journey, wishing him well. The second old man stood as well, his 2 newly transformed brothers rising with him. "I am Hassan. These are my brothers, Karim and Nasir. We are learning again how to be family. It is not easy, but then nothing worthwhile ever is." The 2 brothers bowed slightly to Salim, their movements still awkward in their reclaimed human forms. "Thank you," Karim said, his 2 wide eyes bright with emotion. "Your courage brought us all together tonight. Your integrity gave us all a chance to change." Rashid stepped forward, Noor beside him. They stood close, but not touching, like 2 trees that have grown near each other, but whose branches have not yet learned to intertwine. "I am Rashid," the third old man said, "and this is Noor. We were husband and wife. We were enemy and prisoner. Now we are—" He glanced at her, and something passed between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. "Now we are 2 people trying to learn who we can become." Noor spoke, her voice still rough from 40 years of silence. "Travel safely, merchant. Tell your wife you love her. Tell her every day. Do not make the mistakes we made. Do not take your happiness for granted." Salim bowed to all of them. "I will remember you. All of you. I will tell these stories as the jinn asked. I will make sure that what happened here tonight is not forgotten." He turned to leave, then paused and turned back. "Will I ever see any of you again?" Farid shrugged gently. "Who can say? The world is large, but the roads that matter are few. Perhaps our paths will cross again. Perhaps they will not. But we will always be connected by this night, by these stories, by the fact that we stood together at the moment when justice could have meant death and chose mercy instead. Salim nodded, accepting this. Then he began to walk, heading east toward the rising sun, toward his city, toward his family, toward the life he thought he had lost. The others watched until he disappeared over a dune, becoming a small, dark figure against the golden sand, then a speck, then nothing. Hassan turned to his brothers. "We too should leave this place. It has been cleansed tonight, but it carries heavy memories. I think we all need to find somewhere new, somewhere without the weight of the past pressing down on us." Karim nodded, his hunched posture making the gesture look oddly like a bow. "Where will we go?" "I do not know," Hassan admitted. "But for the first time in 15 years, that uncertainty feels like freedom rather than fear. We will walk and see where the road takes us. We will find work where we can. We will learn to be brothers again, step by step, day by day." Nasir spoke, his voice hesitant. "Will you teach us how to be good men? We have forgotten, or perhaps we never knew. 15 years as dogs taught us dependence and gratitude, but we need to learn more. How to be honest, how to be trustworthy, how to think of others before ourselves." Hassan looked at his brothers, these men who had betrayed him twice, who had been transformed into animals as punishment, who now stood before him with genuine humility, asking to be taught basic decency. A year ago, even a week ago, he would have felt bitter satisfaction at seeing them so reduced. But now he felt only a tired compassion. "I will teach you what I know," he said, "but the real teaching will come from life itself, from the choices you make every day, from the moments when no one is watching and you must decide who you want to be." He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "You will stumble. You will be tempted. The habits of a lifetime, of 2 lifetimes now, do not change overnight. But if you are sincere, if you are willing to do the hard work, then yes, I believe you can become better men than you were." The 3 brothers stood together in the growing light, and for the first time in decades, they looked like family. Rashid and Noor remained by the spring after the others had begun to pack up their few belongings. They sat side by side on the grass, not quite touching, watching the water bubble up from the deep earth. "Where will we go?" Noor asked quietly. Rashid was silent for a long moment. "There is a city 3 weeks' journey to the south. I have never been there. No one knows us. We could start over, build new lives. You could—" He hesitated. "You could go your own way. I would give you money, help you establish yourself. You are not bound to me." Noor looked at him, this man who had been her husband, her jailer, her curse, and now— what? She was not entirely sure, but she knew she did not want to be alone. "I have been alone for 40 years, she said. "Even when I stood beside you every day, I was alone, unable to speak, unable to connect, trapped in my own head, with only my guilt and regret for company. I do not want to be alone anymore." She took a breath. "I know we cannot be what we were. That marriage died long ago, but perhaps we could be something new. Companions, friends, 2 people who share a terrible history and are trying to build something better from the ruins." Rashid nodded slowly. "I would like that. I think I need that. For 40 years I defined myself by my revenge. Without it, I do not know who I am. Perhaps we could figure out who we are together." They sat in silence for a while longer, comfortable now, the awkwardness beginning to ease. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, burning away the cool of night. "I remember," Noor said suddenly, "when we were first married, before everything went wrong. You used to bring me jasmine flowers. Do you remember?" Rashid's expression softened. I remember. You would put them in your hair. You said they made you feel like a garden. I was happy then, Noor said quietly. I did not appreciate it. I did not understand that happiness is not something you are entitled to. It is something you tend, like a garden, with care and attention and gratitude. I let my garden die through neglect and foolishness. She looked at him. But gardens can be replanted. Not the same garden. Those flowers are gone forever. But a new garden. Different flowers, different colors, but still beautiful, if we are patient, if we are careful, if we water it with kindness instead of bitterness. Rashid felt his eyes sting with tears. You always were better with words than I was. I had 40 years to practice, Noor said with a small, sad smile. 40 years of conversations I could not have, speeches I could not give, apologies I could not make. My head was full of words with nowhere to go. Now they are spilling out, and I am not sure I can stop them. Then do not stop them, Rashid said. Talk to me. Tell me everything. We have years of silence to fill with words. Tell me what it was like. Tell me what you thought about. Tell me how you survived. So she did. As the sun rose higher and the desert grew hot around them, Noor spoke. She told him about the first days of transformation, the terror and confusion. She told him about learning to think like a gazelle while maintaining human consciousness. She told him about the strange beauty of experiencing the world through animal senses, the vividness of sense, the acuity of hearing, the constant awareness of her own vulnerability. She told him about watching him age, watching bitterness harden his features, watching the kind man she had married slowly disappear behind walls of anger. She told him about wanting to apologize, wanting to explain, wanting to beg forgiveness, but having no way to speak, no way to make him understand. And she told him about the guilt, the endless, crushing guilt that came with understanding. Too late, what she had destroyed. The marriage, yes, but also the man he could have been if she had not poisoned his life with betrayal. Rashid listened to all of it, and sometimes he wept, and sometimes he sat in stony silence, and sometimes he reached out tentatively and touched her hand. And Noor kept talking, the words flowing like water from a spring that has been blocked for too long and is finally free. Farid and Yasmin prepared to leave last. They had less to pack than the others, just a small bundle of belongings, a water skin, a bit of food. After 55 years of traveling together, they had learned to live with very little. The gazelle nuzzled Farid's hand, and he understood, in the way he had learned to understand over decades, that she wanted to visit the spring one more time before they left. They walked to the water's edge together. Yasmin drank deeply, the water cold and sweet. Then she stood very still, looking at her reflection in the pool. Farid crouched beside her, looking at his own reflection next to hers. An old man with a white beard and kind eyes, a gazelle with liquid brown eyes that held more intelligence than most humans could claim. We make an odd pair, Farid said softly. An old man and his gazelle wife. People probably think I am mad, talking to an animal as if she can understand. But you and I know the truth, do we not? Yasmin made that new sound the jinn had given her. Not quite speech, but more nuanced than an animal cry. Farid heard in it affection, agreement, and something else. A question, perhaps. Am I happy? Farid said, translating what he had heard. Yes, my love, I am happy. Not in the way I imagined when we were young. Not in the way I would have chosen if the choice had been mine. But happy nonetheless, because I have you, because we have each other. Because we learned that love is not about the form it takes, but about the choice to stay, to care, to cherish, even when everything changes. The gazelle pressed her head against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her neck. They stood that way for a long time, an embrace that had been perfected over decades, their bodies knowing exactly how to fit together despite their different shapes. "Shall we go?" Farid finally asked. "There are new roads to walk, new places to see. Perhaps we will find other travelers who need to hear the stories of last night. Perhaps we will simply wander and enjoy the time we have left." Yasmin made a sound of agreement, and they turned away from the spring. As they walked, Farid began to hum an old song, a song from their youth, from when they had both been human, from a time so long ago it felt like a dream. And as he hummed, the gazelle swayed her head in time with the melody, and in that small gesture was a lifetime of shared memory, of love that had survived transformation, of a bond that was stronger than any curse could ever break. By mid-morning, the oasis was empty again. The fire had burned down to cold ashes. The grass where they had all sat bore the impressions of their bodies, but the wind was already beginning to erase those marks. In a few hours, there would be no sign that anything unusual had happened here, but the spring still bubbled up from the earth, singing its eternal song. The palm fronds still whispered their secrets. The white flowers still dotted the grass like scattered stars, and buried somewhere in the sand near the spring, pieces of a shattered sword lay hidden, slowly being covered by drifting grains, slowly being forgotten, slowly becoming part of the earth again. Curses had been broken here, lives had been changed, stories had been told that would ripple outward through time, carried by those who had witnessed them, spreading like seeds on the wind. The oasis had been a place of judgment, a place where death had waited with a drawn sword. Now it was simply an oasis again, a place of water and shade and rest for weary travelers, a place where date palms grew and white flowers bloomed, and the spring sang its song of contentment. But if you listened carefully, very carefully, on certain nights, when the stars were bright and the wind was still, you might hear other sounds layered beneath the water's murmur, the echo of stories told around a campfire, the whisper of transformation and mercy, the faint, fading memory of the night when a djinn set down his sword and chose forgiveness over vengeance. The oasis remembered, and the desert, which sees everything and forgets nothing, would carry that memory in its sand and stones forever. Chapter 11. The Merchant's Return. Salim walked for 7 days through the desert, just as he had walked 7 days to reach the oasis. But everything was different now. The sun that had felt oppressive before now felt warm and welcoming. The sand that had seemed endless before now seemed beautiful in its vastness. Every star at night was a blessing. Every sunrise was a gift he had not expected to receive. He walked faster than he had on the journey out. He was impatient now, eager, desperate to see his family again. His feet hurt. His lips cracked from the dry air. His water ran low. But none of it mattered, because he was alive, and he was going home, and every step brought him closer to the people he loved. On the morning of the 7th day, he crested a dune and saw the walls of his city rising from the desert like a miracle of stone and faith. He stood for a moment just looking at it, this place where he had been born, where he had built his life, where his family waited believing him dead. He began to run. His old legs protested, his lungs burned. But he ran anyway, stumbling down the dune, racing across the flat ground toward the city gates. He ran past startled travelers, past merchants setting up for the morning market, past children playing in the dust. People stared at him, this wild-eyed old man running through the streets like a madman. Some recognized him and gasped, pointing, whispering, "Is that?" But he was dead. We heard he went to face a jinn and never returned." Salim did not stop to explain. He ran through the winding streets, past the mosque, past the market, toward the neighborhood where his house stood. His house, with its blue door and its window boxes and its pomegranate tree in the garden. He burst through the gate into the courtyard and stopped. His wife was there, dressed in the gray robes of mourning. She was kneeling by the fountain, filling a water jug, her movements slow and heavy with grief. She had aged in his absence, or perhaps grief had aged her. Her face was thinner, lined with sorrow. Her hands trembled as she lifted the jug. "Amina," Salim whispered. She dropped the jug. It shattered on the stones, water spreading in a dark stain. She turned, her eyes wide, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Salim?" Her voice was barely audible. "Salim, are you?" He crossed the courtyard in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She stood rigid for a moment, as if unable to believe he was real. Then suddenly she collapsed against him, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "You are alive," she gasped between sobs. "You are alive. You came back. You are alive." "I am alive," he confirmed, holding her tightly, feeling her warmth, her realness, the solid presence of her in his arms. "I am home. I am here. I am not leaving you again." The commotion brought the children running from inside the house. They stopped in the doorway, staring, unable to process what they were seeing. Their father, their dead father, holding their mother in the courtyard. Then his youngest daughter, little Zara, only 5 years old, let out a shriek of pure joy and ran toward him. "Baba, Baba, you came back, you came back." The other children followed, and suddenly Salim was surrounded by his family, all of them crying, all of them talking at once, all of them touching him, as if to confirm he was real and not some grief-induced vision. "How?" Amina kept asking. "How are you here? The jinn? What happened with the jinn?" "Later," Salim said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I will tell you everything later. Right now, just let me hold you. Let me look at you. Let me remember what it feels like to be home." They stood in the courtyard for a long time, this knot of family reunited, this tangle of arms and tears and joy. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, began to gather at the gate. Word spread through the neighborhood, then through the city. "The merchant who went to face a jinn has returned. He is alive. It is a miracle." That evening, after the initial shock had worn off, after the children had been fed and put to bed, after the neighbors had finally stopped coming by to confirm with their own eyes that he was really alive, Salim sat in the garden with Amina. The pomegranate tree rustled overhead. The fountain sang its gentle song. Stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. "Tell me," Amina said quietly. "Tell me everything." So Salim told her. He told her about arriving at the oasis and finding the 3 old men. He told her about the jinn appearing with his sword drawn, ready to take the life that was owed. And then he told her the stories, all 3 of them, in as much detail as he could remember. He told her about Farid and Yasmin, the devoted husband and his gazelle wife, about love that survived transformation and decades. He told her about Hassan and his brothers, about betrayal and mercy, about the hard work of forgiveness, and he told her about Rashid and Noor, about revenge and its terrible cost, about the courage it takes to let go of anger and try to build something new. Amina listened without interrupting, her hand in his, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "So the jinn forgave you," she finally said, "because these stories changed his heart." "Yes," Salim confirmed. "He said that killing me would not bring his son back. That revenge would only create more grief. That mercy breaks curses. Amina squeezed his hand. These stories, they are important. They are not just tales of what happened that night. They are lessons, truths we need to remember. The jinn said the same thing, Salim said. He asked me to tell these stories, to make sure they are not forgotten. He said they were a gift, earned with truth and pain and courage. Then we must tell them, Amina said firmly. To our children, to our neighbors, to anyone who will listen. These stories have power. They saved your life. Perhaps they can save others in different ways. Salim nodded. I thought the same thing. But how? Who will listen to an old merchant telling strange tales about jinn and transformations? Amina smiled, the first real smile he had seen on her face since his return. Everyone will listen. Trust me. A man returns from certain death with stories of mercy and magic. The whole city will want to hear. You will probably be telling these tales for the rest of your life. She was right, of course. Word spread quickly. Within days, people began coming to Salim's house, asking to hear the stories. He told them in his courtyard, under the pomegranate tree, while neighbors and strangers sat on carpets and cushions and listened with rapt attention. He told them about the 3 old men and their companions. He told them about the jinn who chose mercy over vengeance. He told them about the night when curses were broken and transformations undone, and stories were shared that changed everything. And people listened. They listened and wept. They listened and thought about their own grudges, their own anger, their own need for revenge. They listened and wondered if perhaps mercy might be more powerful than justice, if forgiveness might heal what punishment could not. The stories spread. Travelers carried them to other cities. Merchants told them in distant marketplaces. Parents told them to their children at bedtime. Slowly, like seeds scattered on fertile ground, the stories took root and grew. Months passed, a year, 2 years. Salim continued to tell the stories, and his reputation as a storyteller grew. But more importantly, he lived the lessons the stories taught. He forgave debts. He showed mercy to those who wronged him. He treated even his servants with dignity and respect, remembering that cruelty can take many forms and that everyone carries invisible burdens. His children grew up hearing the stories and absorbing their lessons. His youngest daughter, Zara, became especially attached to the tale of Farid and Yasmin. I want a love like that, she would say, a love that survives anything, a love that chooses to stay even when everything changes. His oldest son, Ahmad, was moved by Hassan's story. It takes more courage to forgive than to punish, he observed. Anyone can be cruel. Only the strong can be merciful. And his middle child, Fatima, pondered Rashid and Noor's tale. They wasted so many years on revenge, she said sadly. But at least they learned eventually. At least they had a chance to start over. That is something. Salim listened to his children discuss the stories and felt proud. These tales were not just history. They were living lessons that shaped how his family saw the world and their place in it. One day, 3 years after the night at the oasis, a stranger came to Salim's door. He was an old man, bent with age, leaning heavily on a walking stick. But his eyes were sharp and kind. "Are you Salim the merchant?" the old man asked. "The one who tells the stories of the jinn and the 3 old men?" "I am," Salim confirmed. "How can I help you?" The old man smiled. "I am Hassan, one of the 3 old men from your story. I wanted to see you again, to see how you were faring, to see if the life you were given back has been a good one." Salim stared at him, then suddenly laughed with delight. "Hassan, come in, come in. Amina, we have a guest, a very special guest." Hassan entered the house and was welcomed like honored family. He stayed for 3 days, and during that time, he told Salim what had happened to the others. Farid and Yasmin were still traveling together, he said. They had become something of legends in their own right. The devoted old man and his gazelle wife who seemed to understand each other without words. People sought them out for advice about love and marriage, believing they possessed special wisdom. Karim and Nasir, Hassan's brothers, had proven themselves over the past 3 years. They worked hard, lived honestly, and never once betrayed Hassan's trust. The marks of their transformation remained: Karim's 2 wide eyes, Nasir's hunched posture, but they had learned to wear these marks as reminders rather than shames. They had become good men, or at least much better men than they had been. "And what of Rashid and Noor?" Salim asked. Hassan's expression became thoughtful. "That is a complicated story. They traveled together for about a year, learning to be companions. It was difficult. Old wounds kept reopening. Old patterns kept repeating. They would fight, then reconcile, then fight again. It was painful to watch." He paused. "But then something shifted. I am not sure exactly what or when, but I saw them about 6 months ago in a market town. They were holding hands. Not like young lovers, but like old friends who have been through war together and survived. They seemed peaceful, as if they had finally laid down their weapons and stopped fighting ghosts." Hassan smiled. Noor was teaching children to read and write. Rashid was working as a bookbinder. Simple lives, quiet lives. But there was contentment there. They had finally built their new garden, I think. Different flowers than they had planted in their youth, but beautiful nonetheless. Salim felt his eyes sting with happy tears. "I am glad. I am so glad they found peace." "As am I," Hassan agreed. "And you? Have you found peace?" Salim looked around his home, at his wife preparing tea, at his children playing in the courtyard, at the evening light filtering through the pomegranate tree. "Yes," he said simply, "I have found peace and gratitude, and the understanding that every day is a gift, every moment precious, every breath a small miracle." Hassan nodded in satisfaction. "Then the jinn's mercy was not wasted. You are living well. You are honoring the life you were given back." Before Hassan left, Salim gave him money, not as payment but as a gift between friends. "For your travels, for your brothers, for whatever you need." Hassan accepted it with grace. "Thank you, my friend, and thank you for keeping the stories alive. They matter more than you know. They change people. They plant seeds that grow into mercy, into forgiveness, into the understanding that we are all connected by our capacity to suffer and our need to be shown grace." They embraced, these 2 men whose lives had intersected for one crucial night 3 years ago. Then Hassan departed, and Salim stood in his doorway, watching the old man disappear into the city's winding streets. He would not see Hassan again, but he would carry the memory of that visit forever, and the confirmation it brought that the stories were true, that the transformations were real, that mercy really had triumphed over vengeance that night in the desert oasis. Chapter 12. The story continues. Years continued to pass, as years do. Salim grew older, his beard turning completely white, his back bending, his steps growing slower. But his mind remained sharp, and his voice remained strong when he told the stories. His children married and had children of their own. His grandchildren sat at his feet in the garden, listening wide-eyed as he told the tales of the 3 old men and the jinn. The stories became family tradition, passed down from generation to generation, each retelling keeping the lessons alive. "Tell us about the gazelle wife, grandfather," his granddaughter would beg. "Tell us about the brother dogs." his grandson would demand. "Tell us about the mule that became a woman again," another would plead. And Salim would tell them every time, never tiring of the tales, because he understood that these stories were more than entertainment. They were medicine for the soul. They were maps for navigating the difficult terrain of being human. They were reminders of what mattered most. Sometimes late at night, when the house was quiet and he could not sleep, Salim would go into the garden and sit beneath the pomegranate tree. He would look up at the stars, the same stars that had shone down on the oasis that miraculous night, and he would think about the jinn. He wondered where Zahir's father was now, what he was doing, whether he had found peace. He wondered if jinn mourned the way humans did, whether grief sat differently on beings made of smokeless fire. He hoped the jinn had been able to let go of his sorrow, to remember his son with love rather than pain, to carry the memory without being crushed by its weight. And sometimes, on those quiet nights, Salim would speak aloud to the stars, as if the jinn might be listening somewhere. "Thank you," he would say. "Thank you for the mercy you showed me. Thank you for choosing life over death. Thank you for the gift of these years with my family. I have tried to live well. I have tried to honor your choice. I have told the stories faithfully. I hope that wherever you are, you have found peace." The stars would shimmer but never answer. The night would remain silent. But Salim always felt better after these one-sided conversations, as if speaking the gratitude aloud somehow sent it out into the universe, where it might reach the one who needed to hear it. When Salim was very old, so old his grandchildren had children of their own, he fell ill. It was not a dramatic illness, not particularly painful. It was simply the gentle decline that comes when a body has lived long and well and is ready to rest. His family gathered around his bed. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand just as she had held it in the courtyard on the day of his return from the oasis, all those years ago. "Tell us the stories one more time, grandfather," his great-granddaughter asked. "Tell us about the night you should have died but lived instead." Salim smiled. His voice was weak now, barely above a whisper, but he told the stories one final time, about Farid and Yasmin, whose love survived transformation, about Hassan and his brothers, who learned that forgiveness is harder and more important than revenge, about Rashid and Noor, who discovered that it is never too late to let go of anger and try to build something new, and about the jinn, who chose mercy over vengeance, and in doing so freed them all, the merchant, the old men, the transformed companions, and most importantly, himself. When he finished, the room was silent except for quiet weeping. Even the youngest children, who did not fully understand the stories, sensed something important was ending. "Promise me," Salim whispered to his family, "that you will keep telling these stories. Promise me they will not die with me. They are important. They are gifts. They have power to change hearts and break curses. Promise me." "We promise," they chorused, tears streaming down their faces. "We will tell them. We will keep them alive. We will pass them down through all the generations to come." Salim smiled, satisfied. He closed his eyes, still holding his wife's hand, and he thought about the oasis. He thought about the 3 old men and their companions. He thought about the jinn and his broken sword. He thought about the choices that are made in moments when everything hangs in the balance. The choice between vengeance and mercy, between holding on and letting go, between defining yourself by your wounds or by your capacity for grace. "It was a good life," he whispered, "worth living, worth every moment." And then, peacefully, surrounded by love, Salim ibn Yusuf, the merchant who kept his word, who faced death with honor, who was granted mercy by a grieving jinn, who carried important stories and passed them down, slipped away from the world, but the stories remained. His children told them to their children, who told them to their children, who told them to their children. The tales spread across the years like ripples spreading across water, touching people who never knew Salim, who never met the three old men, who never saw a jinn but who needed the lessons these stories taught. In marketplaces and gardens, in homes and caravanserais, around campfires and fountains, the stories were told, and with each telling, they worked their quiet magic. They softened hearts hardened by anger. They opened minds closed by certainty. They reminded people that transformation is always possible, that forgiveness heals what punishment cannot, that mercy is strength rather than weakness. The stories became legend. Some people believed they were true, some thought they were beautiful fictions. But whether believed or not, whether historical or mythical, the stories did their work, because that is what good stories do. They survive their tellers, they transcend their origins, they become larger than the events that created them. They become vessels for truth, carriers of wisdom, seeds of change planted in the fertile soil of the human heart. And in a desert oasis, far from any city, where date palms grow and a spring bubbles up cold and pure, where white flowers bloom in impossible beauty, and the sand remembers everything. If you visit on certain nights, when the stars are bright and the air is still, you might feel something, a presence, an attention, the sense that you are being watched by something ancient and wise. And if you are very quiet, very still, very open to mystery, you might hear a voice carried on the wind, a voice like distant thunder, like stone breaking, like grief transforming into something gentler, the voice of a jinn who learned that carrying sorrow does not require carrying a sword, the voice of a father who lost a son but found a different kind of wisdom in the loss, the voice of a being 3,000 years old who was taught something new by 3 old men and their transformed companions, and a merchant brave enough to keep his word. And the voice says, soft as falling sand, constant as the stars, remember these stories. Remember that every being carries hidden transformations. Remember that mercy breaks curses. Remember that vengeance imprisons the one who seeks it. Remember that love survives anything if it is tended with patience and hope. Remember all of this and tell it to anyone who will listen. Remember, remember, remember. And the desert, which forgets nothing, carries that word across the dunes, through the wadis, over the mountains, into the cities and villages and homes where people gather to tell stories. Remember, the stories live on, the lessons endure, the transformations continue, and mercy, which broke a curse one night in an oasis, continues to break curses wherever the stories are told, and the lessons are learned, and the choice is made, again and again and again, to let go of the sword and reach out an empty hand, the choice to forgive, the choice to hope, the choice to love, the choice to remember that we are all connected by our capacity to suffer and our desperate need to be shown grace. This is the gift of the stories. This is the legacy of that night. This is the truth that survives all transformations. That in the end, mercy is stronger than vengeance. That love survives even death. That stories carry truths our hearts need to hear. And that every ending is also a beginning, a chance to become something new, something better, something more than we were before. The merchant learned this. The 3 old men learned this. The jinn learned this. And now, if you have listened, you have learned it too. Carry it well. Tell it faithfully. Let it transform you. This is the story. This is the gift. This is the end, and also the beginning. Chapter 13. The Traveler's Tale. Many years after Salim's death, when his great-great-grandchildren were old, and his name had become more legend than memory, a young traveler came to the city where Salim had once lived. His name was Omar, and he was a scholar, one who collected stories from across the world, writing them down in careful script so they would not be lost to time. Omar had heard whispers of the tale about the merchant and the jinn, different versions in different cities, each slightly changed by the telling, like a river that alters its course over years. He wanted to find the original story, the true version, before it dissolved completely into myth. He asked in the marketplace. He inquired at the mosque. He spoke to old men in tea houses who claimed to remember hearing their grandfathers tell the tale. Each gave him fragments, pieces, versions that contradicted each other in small ways, but agreed on the essential truths. There had been a merchant, there had been a jinn, there had been mercy where vengeance was expected. Finally, someone directed him to a house on the edge of the city, a modest dwelling with a blue door and a garden where a very old pomegranate tree grew. That was Salim's house, the person told him. His descendants still live there. If anyone knows the true story, they will. Omar knocked on the blue door. It was opened by a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. "Peace be upon you," Omar said. "I am seeking the story of Salim the merchant. I was told his family still lives here." The woman smiled. "Peace be upon you as well. I am Salim's great-great-granddaughter. The story you seek has been told in this house every year on the anniversary of his return. Come in. Sit. I will tell you what my grandmother told me, what her grandmother told her, passed down through the generations without change." Omar entered the house and was led to the garden, where the ancient pomegranate tree spread its branches over a courtyard, much like the one Salim had loved. The woman brought tea and honey cakes, and as the afternoon sun slanted golden through the leaves, she told the story. She told it beautifully, with all the details intact, the names of the three old men, the nature of their companions' transformations, the exact words the jinn had spoken when he chose mercy over vengeance. Omar wrote quickly, his pen scratching across parchment, capturing every word. When she finished, Omar sat back and read through his notes. "This is remarkable," he said. "The story has survived with such clarity, such detail. Usually tales change dramatically over generations, but this one seems to have been preserved almost perfectly." The woman nodded. "My ancestor made his family promise to keep the story unchanged. He said it was not just a tale but a teaching, that its power lay in its truth. So we have been careful, very careful, to tell it exactly as it was told to us." She refilled Omar's teacup. "But you know, the story did not end with my ancestor's death. There are later chapters, things that happened after, that are also part of the tale." Omar leaned forward, interested. "Tell me." The woman settled back in her chair. "About 40 years after Salim died, a young woman came to this house. She was perhaps 30 years old, beautiful in a quiet way, with unusual eyes. They were set slightly too wide apart, which gave her face a strange but not unpleasant quality. She asked to speak with Salim's family, said she had a story she needed to tell." Omar's pen was poised, ready. She said her name was Layla. She was the daughter of Karim, one of the brothers who had been transformed into dogs. She had grown up hearing her father tell the story of that night in the oasis, of his transformation and his redemption. She said her father had died the year before, peaceful and content, having spent the last decades of his life trying to be worthy of the mercy he had been shown. The woman's voice grew softer. But before he died, he asked Layla to find Salim's family, to thank them, even though Salim himself was long gone, to tell them that the story had saved not just the merchant's life that night, but had continued to save lives. His life, his brother's life, the lives of everyone who heard it and learned from it. She paused, remembering. Layla stayed with our family for a week. She told us stories her father had told her, about traveling with Hassan and Nasir, about learning to be honest and trustworthy again, about the hard daily work of transformation. She said the mark he carried, those two wide eyes that she had inherited, was not a curse but a gift, a reminder that people can change, that redemption is possible, that mercy has power to reshape not just one life, but generations. Omar wrote quickly. Did she say what happened to Hassan, or to the other old men? Yes, the woman said. Hassan, she told us, had lived to be very old. He had watched his brothers become good men, watched them marry and have families of their own, watched them build lives defined not by their worst mistakes, but by their long redemption. He died satisfied, knowing that his mercy had not been wasted. She stood and plucked a pomegranate from the tree, its skin red as blood, its weight heavy with seeds. Layla brought news of the others too. Farid and his gazelle wife Yasmin had become legendary, she said. People across many lands knew of them. The devoted husband and his transformed wife, who understood each other without words. They had traveled until they were both very old, and then one day Farid sat down beneath a tree to rest and simply did not wake up. The gazelle lay down beside him and died the same day, in the same hour. Their bodies were found together, peaceful, as if they had simply decided together that it was time to go. Omar felt tears prick his eyes. And Rashid and Noor? The woman split open the pomegranate, revealing the jewel-like seeds within. She offered some to Omar before continuing. Layla did not know much about them, only that they had settled in a small town, had lived quietly together for many years. Whether they had found happiness or merely peace, she could not say, but they had stayed together, and perhaps that itself was a kind of success, choosing every day to tend their new garden rather than return to the ruins of the old one. They sat in silence for a time, eating pomegranate seeds, the tart sweet juice staining their fingers red. There is one more thing, the woman said. Something my grandmother told me that I have never forgotten. She said that about 10 years after Salim's death, on the anniversary of his return from the oasis, a stranger came to the house. He was tall, bronze-skinned with eyes that seemed to glow from within. He asked if this had been Salim, the merchant's home. Omar's hand stilled on the parchment. The jinn. My grandmother believed so, though he never said. He asked if Salim had lived well, if he had kept his promise to tell the stories. My great-grandmother, Salim's wife Amina, told him yes, that Salim had lived every day with gratitude, that he had told the stories faithfully until his last breath, that his children and grandchildren continued to tell them. The woman's voice became very quiet. The stranger wept then, golden tears that left traces on his bronze skin. He said, "Good. Then mercy was not wasted. Then my son's death, accidental though it was, led to something meaningful, to stories that teach truth, to lessons that break curses, to the understanding that love is stronger than vengeance." And then he was gone. Amina went to the gate, but there was no one there. No footprints in the dust. Nothing but the faint smell of incense and desert wind. Omar sat back, overwhelmed. So the jinn did find peace. He learned what he needed to learn. Yes, the woman agreed. Or at least we believe so. We cannot know for certain. But the fact that he came, that he wept, that he called mercy meaningful, These suggest a being transformed by his own choice, changed by the decision he made that night. She looked up at the pomegranate tree. You know, this tree was here when Salim lived. It was already old then. Now it is ancient, nearly dead. But it still bears fruit every year, still produces these seeds. And I think that is what the story is like. An old tree that keeps bearing fruit, keeps producing seeds that can be planted elsewhere, keeps giving life even as it ages. Omar finished his tea and carefully folded his parchment, now covered in neat script. Thank you. You have given me something precious. Not just a story, but the story behind the story, the continuation, the legacy, the evidence that the lessons really did spread and change lives. The woman walked him to the blue door. As he was leaving, she called after him. Scholar, what will you do with the story now that you have it? Omar turned back. I will write it in my book of collected tales. I will carry it to other cities, other lands. I will tell it to anyone who will listen. I will make sure it survives another generation, and another, and another. She smiled. Then you too are part of the story now. You too are a bearer of the seeds. Plant them well. Omar bowed and departed, his bag heavy with parchment and ink, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility, to tell the story faithfully, to preserve its truth, to let it work its magic on new hearts in new places. Chapter 14. The Book of Transformations. Omar traveled for many years after leaving Salim's city. He went north to Damascus, where he told the story in a scholar's circle and watched learned men weep. He went west to Cairo, where he told it in a marketplace and saw a crowd gather, growing silent as the tale unfolded. He went east to Baghdad, where he told it in a library, and a scribe asked permission to copy it into the official archives. Everywhere he went, the story had power. It crossed boundaries of language and culture. It spoke to something universal in the human heart, the desire for mercy, the need for transformation, the hope that even our worst mistakes need not define us forever. In each city, Omar collected new stories, tales of people whose lives had been changed by hearing about the merchant and the jinn, a woman who forgave her husband's betrayal after hearing about Rashid and Noor, a man who reconciled with his brother after hearing about Hassan and the brother dogs, a couple who stayed together through the wife's illness after hearing about Farid and Yasmin. The stories multiplied, they cross-pollinated, they merged with local tales and emerged transformed, but still recognizable, still carrying the essential truths. Omar grew old on the road, his beard turning white, his back bending from years of walking. He filled 3 volumes with the stories he collected, stories of mercy and transformation, forgiveness and redemption, love surviving against impossible odds. He called his collection The Book of Transformations. In the introduction, he wrote, "These stories come from many lands and many tongues, but they all speak the same language, the language of change. They tell us that we are not trapped by what we have been, that curses can be broken, that even the deepest wounds can heal if we are willing to do the hard work of forgiveness, that love, when it is true and patient, survives everything, time, distance, even transformation from one form to another. The story of the merchant and the jinn is the heart of this collection, the seed from which all other tales grew. It teaches that mercy is not weakness, but strength, that choosing life over death, forgiveness over vengeance, hope over despair, these are the most difficult and most important choices we ever make. I have spent my life gathering these stories. Now I give them to you. Read them, share them, let them work their magic on your heart. And when you find yourself faced with a choice between holding on to anger or letting it go, Remember the Jinn who set down his sword. Remember that transformation is always possible. Remember that the stories continue, and you are part of them now. Omar died in a small village, far from his birthplace, surrounded by strangers who had become friends through the sharing of stories. His last words were from the tale he had heard so long ago in Salim's garden. Remember, remember, remember. His books were distributed to libraries across the known world. Copies were made. The stories spread further. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Languages changed. The world transformed itself over and over, but the stories endured. In a library in Córdoba, a young scholar found Omar's Book of Transformations and was moved to tears by the tale of the merchant and the Jinn. She translated it into her own language and shared it with her students, who carried it to new lands. In a monastery in the mountains, a monk copied the story into an illuminated manuscript, surrounding the text with images of date palms and springs, gazelles and dogs, bronze-skinned jinn with eyes of fire. The manuscript survived wars and fires and the slow decay of time, passing from hand to hand, generation to generation. In a marketplace in a distant land, a storyteller told the tale to a crowd of children, simplifying it but keeping its essential truth. Those children grew up and told it to their children, who told it to theirs, until the story had traveled so far from its origin that no one remembered there had really been a merchant named Salim, a jinn named Zahir's father, 3 old men with transformed companions, but they remembered the lessons, and that was what mattered. The story changed as it traveled, the way rivers change the stones they flow over. In some versions, there were 5 old men instead of 3. In others, the jinn had wings. In still others, the merchant was a woman, or the transformations were different, or the oasis was replaced by a mountain, or a forest, or a cave. But certain elements remained constant across all versions: a debt of death, stories told in exchange for mercy, transformations of people into animals, of anger into forgiveness, of vengeance into grace, a choice made to set down the sword, the understanding that mercy is stronger than justice, that love survives transformation, that redemption is always possible. These truths persisted, encoded in the story's DNA, surviving every mutation and variation. They were the seeds that Salim's descendant had spoken of, seeds that could be planted anywhere and would grow, adapting to local soil but producing the same essential fruit. In the 20th century, in a city that would have been unimaginable to Salim or Omar or any of the story's earlier tellers, a professor of literature found an ancient manuscript in a university archive. It was Omar's original Book of Transformations, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The professor, a woman named Dr. Malika Hassan, spent 3 years translating the book into modern language. She was struck by the story of the merchant and the jinn, by its complexity, its wisdom, its remarkable preservation across centuries. She wrote in her introduction to the new translation, "This story, which I have titled The Merchant and the 3 Jinn, though technically there is only 1 jinn in the tale, is remarkable not just for its narrative beauty, but for the psychological and moral insights it contains. It understands that revenge, while initially satisfying, ultimately imprisons the one who seeks it. It understands that transformation, whether literal as in the tale or metaphorical as in our own lives, is both possible and necessary for growth. It understands that love is not a feeling, but a practice, a daily choice to stay and care and cherish even when circumstances change. Most remarkably, It understands that stories themselves have transformative power. The merchant's life is saved not by argument or pleading, but by stories that open the jinn's heart and change his understanding of justice and mercy. This meta-narrative aspect, a story about the power of stories, makes the tale particularly sophisticated. It suggests that our narratives shape our reality, that the stories we tell ourselves and each other determine what we believe is possible and what we believe is required. If we tell ourselves stories of vengeance and punishment, we create a world of endless retaliation. But if we tell ourselves stories of mercy and transformation, we create a world where redemption is possible, where curses can be broken, where even the deepest wounds can heal. The Merchant and the Jinn, then, is not just an entertaining tale from the distant past. It is a teaching story, a wisdom text, a guide for how to live in a world that often demands vengeance but desperately needs mercy. Dr. Hassan's translation was published and became, unexpectedly, quite popular. People in the modern world, dealing with modern problems, found something in this ancient tale that spoke to them. They read about the merchant keeping his word despite every reason to break it, and they thought about their own integrity. They read about the jinn setting down his sword, and they thought about their own anger and whether they were ready to release it. Book clubs discussed it. Therapists recommended it to clients struggling with forgiveness. Teachers read it to students learning about conflict resolution. The story, which had begun more than a millennium ago in a desert oasis, continued to work its magic in air-conditioned rooms and on electronic screens. And somewhere, in what place no one could say, in what form no one could imagine, perhaps there was a being of smokeless fire who had once been a grieving father, who had once raised a sword, who had once chosen mercy over vengeance. Perhaps he watched the story spread and change and endure, and perhaps he understood that his son's brief life and accidental death had created ripples that spread across time itself. Perhaps he understood that Zahir, who had loved music and beauty and the song of a spring in an oasis, had become immortal, not in the way jinn are immortal, but in a way that mattered more, immortal in the story, in the lesson, in the transformation his death had catalyzed. Perhaps he understood that mercy, once chosen, never stops working, that it spreads like light, touching everything it reaches, illuminating darkness, breaking curses, healing wounds. Perhaps he was at peace, or perhaps these are just the hopes of those who tell and retell the story, who want to believe that even a jinn can find redemption, that even the deepest grief can transform into something life-giving rather than destructive. But whether the jinn found peace or not, the story endures, and that perhaps is its own kind of immortality. Chapter 15. The Story That Never Ends. In a time yet to come, in a world beyond our imagining, people will still tell stories. The medium may change. Perhaps they will be transmitted directly from mind to mind, or projected as holograms, or encoded in forms we cannot yet conceive. But the human need for narrative, for meaning, for connection through shared tales, this will endure as long as consciousness endures. And among those future stories, in whatever form they take, there will be echoes of this one, a tale of debt and mercy, of transformation and redemption, of a being who chose to set down his weapon and walk away from vengeance. The names may change, the details may mutate beyond recognition, but the essential truth will remain, will persist, will continue to work its quiet magic on hearts that need to hear it. Because this is what stories do. This is their power and their purpose. They are not just entertainment, not just ways to pass time. They are medicine for the soul. They are maps for the heart. They are seeds planted in the fertile ground of human consciousness, growing into understanding, into compassion, into the courage to choose mercy over vengeance. But let us return now to the oasis where it all began. Let us imagine visiting that place one more time. The spring still bubbles up from deep in the earth, cold and pure and eternal. The date palms still sway in the desert wind, their fronds whispering secrets in a language older than words. The white flowers still bloom in impossible beauty, scattered across the grass like fallen stars. If you sit by the spring and are very quiet, very still, very open to mystery, you might feel something, a presence, a sense that this place remembers, that the sand and stone and water hold the memory of that night centuries ago when stories were told and curses were broken and a sword was set down forever. You might hear very faintly the echo of voices, an old man speaking gently to a gazelle, their communication transcending the barrier of species because love finds a way. Two brothers asking for forgiveness, their voices rough with disuse, their words heavy with the weight of 15 years as animals. A man and woman, once married, once enemies, once prisoner and jailer, now tentatively, carefully, beginning to build something new from the ruins of what they had destroyed. And a voice like distant thunder, like breaking stone, like grief transforming into something gentler. A jinn saying the words that changed everything. I forgive the final third. The debt is paid, not with blood, but with wisdom, not with death, but with mercy. These echoes live in the place. They are woven into the fabric of the oasis, as permanent as the spring, as enduring as the palms. And if you are very fortunate, if the stars are aligned just right, if your heart is open and your need is great, you might hear something more. A whisper carried on the wind, a message left for all who come seeking wisdom. Every being carries hidden transformations. Every heart holds the capacity for both cruelty and compassion. Every moment offers a choice, to pick up the sword or to set it down, to hold on to anger or to release it, to seek vengeance or to choose mercy. These choices shape us more than our circumstances do. They determine not what happens to us, but who we become in response to what happens. Love is not a feeling that arrives and departs like weather. It is a practice, a discipline, a daily choice to stay and care and cherish even when everything changes. It is Farid stroking his gazelle's neck with the same tenderness he showed when she was human. It is Hassan keeping his brothers close even in their shame. It is Rashid and Noor choosing day by difficult day to build something new rather than dwelling in the ashes of what was. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not pretending the wound does not exist. It is the hard work of releasing the sword while the wound is still fresh, while the anger is still justified, while everything in you screams for vengeance. It is saying, I will not let this define me. I will not let this destroy me. I will survive it and grow beyond it and become more than my pain. Transformation is not optional. Life transforms us whether we consent or not. Through loss, through love, through the inevitable passage of time. But we can choose whether to be transformed into something bitter or something better. We can choose whether our wounds become weapons or wisdom. And stories. Stories are the vessels that carry these truths across time and space. They are the way we pass wisdom from generation to generation. They are how we connect with people we will never meet, times we will never see, places we will never visit. They are humanity's gift to itself, the accumulated wisdom of all who came before, preserved in narrative form, waiting to teach us what we need to know. This is the message of the oasis. This is what the spring sings as it bubbles up from the dark earth into the light. This is what the date palms whisper as they sway in the eternal wind. This is what the white flowers know as they bloom and fade and bloom again, season after season, century after century. And now you know it too. You have heard the story of Salim the merchant and the jinn who chose mercy. You have heard the stories within the story of Farid and Yasmin, Hassan and his brothers, Rashid and Noor. You have followed the tale through the centuries, watching it change and spread and endure. You are part of the story now, not a passive listener, but an active participant, because stories are not complete until they are received, understood, integrated. They require a reader, a listener, a heart willing to let them work their transformation. So what will you do with this story? Will you let it change you? Will you look at your own anger, your own grudges, your own desire for revenge, and ask if perhaps there is another way? Will you consider the possibility that mercy might be stronger than justice, that forgiveness might heal what punishment cannot? Will you look at the people around you, even those who have hurt you, betrayed you, wronged you, and wonder what transformations they might be carrying, what wounds they hide, what stories shape them into who they are? Will you tell this story to others? Will you pass it on, adapted to your own language and context, but preserving its essential truths? Will you be another link in the chain that stretches across centuries, another bearer of the seeds, another keeper of the wisdom? The story asks nothing less of you. It demands that you become part of it, that you take its lessons and live them, that you let it transform you from someone who reads about mercy into someone who practices it. This is the gift of the story, and also its challenge. In the desert oasis, the sun sets as it has set countless times before. The sky blazes with color, orange and pink and purple and gold. The shadows grow long. The heat of day gives way to the cool of evening. The spring continues its eternal song. The palms rustle gently. The white flowers close their petals, preparing for night. And somewhere, in some form, perhaps a jinn pauses in whatever work occupies beings of smokeless fire. Perhaps he remembers a night long ago when he stood with a raised sword ready to take a life. Perhaps he remembers the stories that stopped his hand. Perhaps he remembers the choice he made, the hardest and most important choice of his 3,000-year existence. Perhaps he smiles, if jinn can smile. Perhaps he whispers to the wind. The stories continue. The mercy spreads. The transformation endures. Perhaps he is at peace. And whether he is or not, whether this is truth or simply the hopeful imagining of those who tell the tale, the story itself is true. Its lessons are real. Its power is genuine. Mercy breaks curses. Forgiveness heals wounds. Love survives transformation. Stories carry truth across time, and every moment offers a choice to pick up the sword or to set it down. Choose wisely. Choose mercy. Choose life. This is the end of the story, and also the beginning. Your story, your transformation. The jinn set down his sword centuries ago, but you hold yours still. What will you do with it? Will you strike? Or will you, like him, find the courage to let it fall, to walk away from vengeance, to choose the harder path of mercy and grace? The story has been told. The lessons have been shared. The wisdom has been passed down through generations, across centuries, from an oasis in the desert to wherever you are now. Now it is yours. Carry it well. Tell it faithfully. Let it transform you. And when you are ready, pass it on to others who need to hear it. This is the way stories survive. This is how wisdom endures. This is the gift of the merchant and the jinn. A gift that keeps giving, generation after generation, transformation after transformation, forever and ever, as long as there are hearts to receive it and voices to tell it. The story ends. The story continues. The story never ends. Remember, remember, remember.